the bids were not unreasonable, that that's just what the industry is calling for today in order to hire contractors. I guess that's a sign of the times that times are getting better, and when that happens, construction costs go up. So what those costs look like is the base bid came in at just over $3 million, and then the additional alternates came into a total of about $380,000. So you can see that the alternates ended up not adding a dramatic increase to the cost of the project. The total bid then was just under $3.5 million. Now, if for some reason, while staff is going to recommend awarding a contract for the entire project, if the council were to consider removing some of the bid items to reduce the cost, because this is a partially federally funded project, we have to remove the alternates in reverse order. So if you wanted to reduce the price, you would have to remove alternate 3, then you could go to 2, then you could go to 1. You can't mix and match. You have to follow it in reverse order. So as I mentioned, this cost is over budget. So let's talk a little bit about the total cost, just to make sure we understand what the total budget would be. The bid came in at again, just under $3.5 million. However, we have additional costs. We do have what's typical during a construction project of this size. We have construction management, and we have, of course, a contingency if there are change orders. We also have street lighting that needs to be provided through this section, and we pay Edison to conduct some of the utility work to install those lights. So that's also an additional expense beyond what our contractor will provide, and that's embedded in that additional $700,000. So we'd be looking at a total budget of just over $4 million. I remember when we used to build projects like this for $1 million, but that's what the costs are today. So looking at our current budget, we had 2 sources of funding. One is our traffic mitigation fee program. Those are fees that have been collected over time from land development projects to contribute to our transportation system. And then we have surface transportation funds, with the STP funds, and those are federal funds. We have a grant of $1.8 million. So we have a budget of $2.9 million, which you can see is lower than the cost of the project. So we do have an opportunity to provide additional funding, because we have a transportation or traffic mitigation fee fund that has a pretty good balance. So we do have adequate funding in there to add another $1.1 million. And we are able to move some STP funds from another project that we didn't use all of the funding on that project, so that we have another $150,000 in the federal STP funds. So we have about $1.25 million of additional funding available we could add to the budget. If we do that with the current budget and adding the additional amount, we would end up with a budget that would be adequate to fund the $4.1 million that again includes both the bid and all the ancillary work and a contingency. Therefore, we're recommending several actions. One is that you appropriate $1.1 million of traffic mitigation fee funds and the $150,000 in STP funds to the project. The action would also be then to award the base bid and all 3 alternates for a total of $3,451,044.10. And then finally, that we would also approve some additional agreements that are in the packet, and those would be for the construction management services. And those are broken into several different specialties, and so we do hire different consultants for each specialty, and you can see the list there of the various consultants, and again, that information is included in your packet. So again, we recommend awarding the contract, the additional ancillary items, and an appropriation. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, Tom, I'm familiar with Granite Construction, because I know they've done some pretty large projects. And I know we've used them in the past. Do you recall what projects in the past that we've used them for?
No, I can't remember specifically which project. We do many projects, and I don't keep track anymore of who does what.
They are reputable, and I know I've seen their.
Yes, we definitely have used them. They are reputable. They do good work, and again, their bid looks very consistent with the other bids so that we know that we aren't, if we were to, for example, rebid the project, it's unlikely we would see costs come in any lower.
Okay. I had a question. Thank you.
Yes, Mike?
When you're looking at the other bidders in this, Tom, of course, they've got a maybe low bidder or most responsible bidder. Were they all kind of in the same area?
The bids, the second lowest bid wasn't much higher, and then after that, the bids went up substantially from there. So this was not only a responsible bid, but the low bid, and certainly what we feel comfortable recommending.
Thank you.
Okay, any other, yes?
I just have a question on timing. If we award the contract, when would you expect it to start, and how long will it take?
Usually we figure a month or so before they mobilize. They need time to get various documents in. They have to get insurance in. They have to prepare a stormwater management plan and things of that nature. So usually it takes them a bit of time to do that. So we would expect to see them mobilize probably late November. And of course you're getting into the holidays, so how they work around that. Although at this point we won't know for sure. We usually, if you do award a contract, then we have a construction meeting to kick off the project, and that's when we have them submit a schedule, and then we have a better idea then. So once we receive a schedule, we can forward that information to you.
But they're ready and willing to get started. It's not like they're,
Yeah, generally of a project on this side, they're geared up and ready to go, but sometimes they may be winding down on another project and, maybe a few extra weeks before they start, and with the holidays as well. So because of that, I can't say for certain that they'll be right out there. Like I say, once we get a schedule, we'll know better. But in most cases, we're seeing the contractors are generally ready to go when we award a contract. However, it is, like I say, a sign of the times. Not only are costs going up, but we're seeing the contractors are getting busier too. And on another project, for example, we had to wait a little bit for them to demobilize on another job before they got to ours. There is a deadline to complete the project, and there are penalties if they don't, but because of the substantial amount of work on this, I don't recall how many days we gave them, but it would take us into the latter part of 2016.
I have a question. Notice there's been a underground construction company out there doing underground work just ahead of the project on the east side of near San Rafael. Is that part of this project?
I'm not certain, but we have our project, our capital projects manager. Maybe he can shed some light.
I'm Ken Matsuoka from Public Works. Yes, there's some preliminary work being done by Camrosa. They're doing some pipeline work, kind of in conjunction with this. They're doing some preliminary work, as well as they will also do some during the middle of our project. After we move the hill over, then they'll put a pipeline there as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I'll move that we appropriate the $1.1 million traffic mitigation fees and $150,000 federal grant funds to project ST-05-01.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Hearing any discussion? If not, please vote.
$1,100,000.
That's a different amount than it says in the suggested action.
It says here $1,100,000.
On the agenda, but
have to
in the
look at the
packet, it says 1.2.
look at the revised agenda.
I'm not looking at the agenda, I'm looking at the item in the packet.
Oh, let's see what it says here.
It says one more.
It says 1.250.
That's right.
But it's not, that's
That's
because
not-
it's not split. In the agenda itself, it splits the 1.25.
Okay,
All right, then,
Okay.
we then need a motion to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with the.
did we
grant-
vote on that? Oh, I didn't vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got to vote on that first.
You didn't call out the,
Okay, motion carries 5-0. All right, sorry about that. Then the second motion would be to authorize the city manager to execute the contract with Granite Construction.
so move,
Second.
Moved and seconded.
including alternates
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
Right. Including alternates 1, 2, and 3.
All alternates, yes. Okay, any discussion? If not, please vote. Motion carries.
Your Honor, I'll move to authorize the city manager to execute the professional service agreements for the construction management, materials testing, and professional design support services with Flippin Engineering, Inc., Virgo Consultants, Inc., Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc., and Jordan Gilbert and Bain Landscape Architects.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion carries 5-0. Motion is carried. Well, this has been a long time coming, but I'm glad to see it's finally here. So thanks staff and everyone for that. Okay, move to the next item, which is
Consent D. Consent D.
ADA proposal.
Your Honor, let me tell you why I asked that this be pulled, and then I guess we can decide if we want a presentation. I started looking at this, and I didn't have time today because I had to get down to Fox Canyon, but I plowed through 405 pages of the 676 in the packet. And all of this is extremely, extremely expensive. And I understand it's federal standards and regulations. But my concern is that we adopt it, and it's happened so many times, and we just start plowing through and we start going through and doing them as was recommended. However, a lot of the things that are recommended in here are not our things. If you get to the Chamber of Commerce building, they're talking about counters. They're talking about not display cases, but they're talking about where they put their pamphlets, the little cases for those. Those are all tenant improvements. They're all theirs. That shouldn't be ours to do. If you look at the Historical Society recommendations, a lot of them are theirs. They're things that the Historical Society installed and put in. That shouldn't be for the city to do. The same with the Ranch Foundation. And so I just think we need to not plow into this. We need to be talking to these other people. But I also have some other concerns about what I think are conflicts. At certain, I mean, if you go through this, there isn't a toilet, there isn't a handrail, there isn't a desk or a table that isn't in some way out of the standards. Most of them by half an inch, and it's $200 here and $4,000 there. But I mean, they're really expensive things, and I think we need to talk about what they are, even though we have to do it, and I understand there's a time crunch because we're always behind, but I just think we need to make sure that we as a city are not going to be paying for things that are not our responsibility, or that I don't consider our responsibility. You may, there are 5 of us here, but I think we need to discuss it.
Your Honor, if I might, the study that we had done identifies all the issues in the city-owned facilities and surrounding property. Each one was identified with a specific cost estimate, and certainly each item, as we go through it, would be brought back to you, especially those that were above the $15,000 purchasing limit. Some of the lower hanging fruit we would do, but certainly those items that you mentioned that were tenant responsibility, we would recommend to the tenant that they take care of those things, but they needed to be identified in the report so we could address them as an overall facility issue. If there's specific things you'd like to talk about, we can certainly handle it any way you'd like. But the plan itself, if you have issues with that, certainly we can discuss those. But if there are no issues with the actual plan, the budgeting aspects were there specifically as estimates, and we will be going through those on a one-by-one basis as we do them, especially as it relates to the larger and more costly projects. And certainly those that are marginal would be rated at a lower priority. So we would be looking at doing this over approximately a 6-year period, with the higher priority items being handled first, and some of those, as you've mentioned, being lower priorities that would be at the end of that list.
Right, and it's a total of $1,304,262 for the estimate. And we have budgeted, I forget how much, for the current year. It didn't appear to me that anything in the current year was going to be coming back to us from the staff report.
Kevin, can you speak to that? I'm not familiar with exactly what that first year laid out project by project. I know there was a lot of things, signage, some things like that we were proceeding with, but the larger projects certainly would come back. Again, we would adhere to our purchasing policy, and they would come back to you based on that policy.
Okay.
One of my concerns, just to follow up on what Charlotte, I had the same concerns, but you know, the newest building in our inventory of buildings, I believe, is the library. And yet there's $155,000 slated to do improvements to the library out of this. And that seems like an extraordinary amount of money for some building that's been less than 10 years old. It just doesn't make sense to me.
And we don't disagree with that. However, the requirements change. Mm-hmm. And those were the things that were laid out, and certainly we will go through them one by one, but if it is a requirement to upgrade, then we would be responsible to do that.
Let me tag on to that, because the toilets are half an inch too low, the table leg space is half an inch too low, and that leads me to ask the tables and the chairs are too low. Are the things for the new library going to be up to these standards, or?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Everything?
Yes. And
Okay.
Those things, like you mentioned, again, are not first priority items to change. So we would probably address those things as we replaced furniture and did other maintenance. We wouldn't go in and address those as a first priority item.
One note about the library is, the library was built in 2007.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
And the current regulations are based on 2010 ADA building code, so there has been some changes.
Okay.
Well, I understand we'll never catch up with Congress because they have no sense of how much money gets spent any place, but it seems to me that we need to do, as you say, is do the serious things first and worry about this some of this trivial stuff later.
Well, here's a priority one. We've got to fix it looks to me like this is the kiosk in the library, and then the public counter, the reach range on the another public counter is wrong. Reach range means how far deep you go. And there's a whole lot of stuff that would appear wouldn't be high priority, but they're priority one. I gather priority one is top priority?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The breakdown for a priority one is basic public access and hazardous conditions.
Okay. Additionally, is in the ADA, is there no exemption at all for preserving history?
Yes, there is. In fact, the ranch house would be one of those buildings.
And that's exactly where my question's going, because they're talking about the types of doorknobs and things like that. I understand they're not accessible, but that's the way they had them back when that was built in the 1800s. And it seems to me that if we start putting in all new type of hardware and all new type of everything in that ranch house, we're going to lose its historic significance.
Yes, I do agree with that, yes. But, when they do the evaluation, they have to go by the letter of the law and go to the worst-case scenarios.
Okay, so by adopting this, is that what we're doing tonight, we're being asked to do?
That's correct. You're adopting the plan.
By adopting the plan, then what does that do if these are, and here I've got the doorknobs on the ranch house, it was page 90 of something, page 50. Do we just start in and start with the top and that's a priority 1. Do we have to, or do we just start, and the reason I'm grilling on this is because when we adopted my very first council meeting in 1986,
86.
we adopted the landscape master plan. And Sandy Bush and Tad Bowen had proposed it, and she said, now, how are we going to implement this? This shouldn't be just started and go through. Well, the next year we started and we went through, and then we lost some money, and we didn't do it for a few years, but we started, and it just was implemented as said, as the plan said, even though it didn't have time years. It wasn't divided by years. This is divided by priority. So my concern is, if we approve this, whatever the verb is that I'm supposed to be saying, if we approve this, how do we know that we're not going to be going through and changing the historical significance of because it says to do it?
Well, in adopting the plan, you're adopting the plan, as you so noted, and certainly when it comes to the ranch and those historical types of items, before we actually made any changes, we would look at exemptions and those other areas to see what exactly it was that we had to do before we would change any of those historic items. Some of the other items, again, as onerous as it may be, we will probably have to address them.
The requirement was to do the evaluation, which we did, and then the transition plan is a flexible living document that we can review on a year-to-year basis, and we can make changes based on budget and resources.
Well,
That was the question I have, and I think that's the important part about it is that we're required to do this plan, but that timing of it and when it happens is that flexibility.
Yes.
Yes, it'd be reasonable to take up to 10 years to finish everything, or to address things on this that we wanted to.
Right. And you can do it to the point of when you're replacing something, it meets the new requirement. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are required by law or Richard's going to jail if he doesn't go in and do all of this within a certain time period.
Correct. If there's a space that has furniture that doesn't meet the requirements, you can delay it until you would go in there and make alterations or buy new furniture.
Correct.
no, I didn't see anything in the plan, maybe I missed it, that allows that kind of flexibility that you're describing. It was basically to prioritize these and start with 1s and goes to 2s and then goes to 3s and so forth.
No, there is some. Well, priority 1 is like I say, it's public access. It's access to parking lots, to curbs, to building entrances.
I understand
That's a little more
that.
critical.
I think I'm concerned that, first of all, like that we start messing around with that ranch house. I spent too many hours out there cleaning doorknobs with paint remover to not to want to see those removed and thrown away.
Well, I do agree with the council on that. Yes.
But going back to my question, isn't the priority 1, 2, and 3 meeting the federal criteria? That's not the priority level that you all set, correct? It's meeting, when it falls into this category, it becomes a priority 1. If it's this kind of thing, it's a 4, it's a whatever.
Yeah, and based on federal guidelines.
Guidelines. So what you're doing is categorizing everything to meet the federal guidelines.
Right. Worst case first, and then the
Right.
smaller stuff later. Yes. And it is, of course,
So-
it's front loaded on the budget.
Excuse me a second, Charlotte. I'd like to say something. In looking at this, you see well over $100,000 that are set aside for the old library. The old library, if someone buys that library, I don't think we should be doing any of this.
Correct. I agree.
Okay, so some of these things will come off the list if that
In
happens.
fact, the library for all 5 priorities is $208,000. $25,000 of that was to install a lift for the little stage in the community room. in the old library. So obviously that's a reduction. So yeah, there's a lot of items that can be looked at and,
Yeah.
and not done, yes.
That gives us flexibility. I can see where it's going now. Thank you.
Okay, I've heard two things. One is they're prioritized. Well, I realize that. Let's dwell right now on priority one. These are the public access things. Can we delay those things until we feel like doing them, or until the things need to be addressed, or do the public access things have to be addressed fairly soon?
We would look at the priority ones as soon as we can, but there is no mandate that they're done in a specific period of time, and it would depend on our resources, the severity of it, and when we could get the project done. So there is some flexibility in that, but the priority ones we do want to take a look at.
Do we have federal funds that are affected if we don't move forward with some of those?
I can't answer that.
Not as far as the facilities and parks, which is this evaluation.
Okay, so there's no federal funds. Okay.
Yeah, now for the public rights-of-way on the streets and bus stops, we would be allowed to make those corrections when we were in that area doing overlays and improvements on the public works schedule.
Oh, but so many of them that we put in not so long ago are no longer in compliance. The curb cuts, the
They changed
It's
the
frustrating.
standard of the curb cut, I guess.
I see several of them going in today, passing around.
I hope they're at the right slope.
How often do you do this? You do it every so many years, correct? This inventory, I'm going to
The
call
first
it an
one.
inventory.
Well,
It's up to the city. We can do it every 5 years, every 10 years. But
Is there a federal mandate on how often you do it?
I don't think so.
well, let me ask you this question. Do you budget the projects each year for, in the fullness of trying to meet the requirements for this particular priority? Let's say priority one, you budget a year's worth of priority one money and projects, right?
Because of the cost, I budgeted priority one for 2 years.
Well, 2 years, yeah.
And remember, some of these can change, Bill, with the old library especially.
Maybe we can make this part of the budget review, is just to ask that the projects that are scheduled for that year to be presented to the council, just so that we sign off on them.
And we can certainly do that.
I think it's important because a lot of these, they may claim they're priority one, but I think that everything that is a table is called a non-fixed desk. And they all have to be 28 inches of leg room, and we seem to have gotten everything that was 27 and a half inches. And and these are priority one things because they are access. So I've got a problem.
Well,
I don't have, I will make a motion to, what are we, adopting it? And
know
on the
what we do with
criteria, what I'm looking at this is you went through the city and you did an inventory, you did an inspection, and you looked at what we had to meet federal guidelines, and you've now put that down on a piece of paper. I don't see this as giving you authority to go out and spend $1.3 million. I see it as a blueprint for when things come up. When we make changes, when funds are available, we go to this to make sure we're in compliance.
Yes, in each budget sequence, we come to you asking money for that particular year, for that particular priority, yes.
And again, some of these may disappear.
Yes.
And I did start to say I made a motion.
Can I add just one question,
Can I
Jeff,
make one
before you do that?
Go
Just
ahead.
one question to Kevin. There's a time frame with this, but there's kind of not. I mean, is it pretty flexible?
Yes. We talked to the architects, and we asked, what is the reasonable time frame? And he says, you can go up to 10 years if you like, but as long as you have this transition plan, and you review it
Oh,
every
it's a
year,
plan. That's all.
and you're making and you're making changes or making some corrections, yes.
And I should also point out that obviously some of these things that are priority one are certainly things that we need to and want to get done. So we will be bringing those projects to you.
We have a chance to look at them again.
And some of those things we certainly want to act on.
Could I ask one thing, too? Like, it was talked a little bit about the doorknobs at the Cameron Ranch. Would there be any, wiggle room as to whether or not they have to be replaced or not? If there's historical value, would they
We
be
will-
understanding on that?
certainly as it relates to the ranch house and the historical significance, we will certainly research that fully before we make any changes, and we will come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I did make a motion, but you never got a second, so.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Not, please vote. Motion carries 5-0 with the
Thank you.
discussion that was ensued here.
Next.
Okay, next is closed sessions. Mr. City Attorney.
I can announce those. We have a conference with Real Property Negotiator. The authority is Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is the former library on at 3100 Ponderosa. Another conference with Real Property Negotiator. The property is the proposed hotel conference center on Ventura Boulevard and Las Posas. Third conference with Real Property Negotiator is the Cedar Oak property on Ventura Boulevard between Cedar and Oak. And on all of those, the negotiating parties are identified, as well as the agency negotiators, and under negotiation on all of them is price and terms of payment. Additional closed sessions are conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9D2. The number of cases is 2. There's public employee performance evaluations for the city manager and city attorney under Government Code Section 54957. And finally, conference with labor negotiators, authority Government Code Section 54957.6. And the employee is the city manager. And I understand there may be some speakers who wish to address the council before we recess to
We
this
do
session.
have a request to be heard, public comment card, and are you finished?
Yes.
Okay. I'll ask, he wants to talk about closed session. Jim Lingle. Mr. Lingle.
Good evening, Mayor Little, members of the City Council, Mr. Pierik, Mr. Fang. Actually, what I wanted to do is provide you with an update on the Camarillo Springs matter. As you know, we began mediation in this regarding this matter months ago. On September 18th, there was a proposal for a revised plan. Since that time, there have been many, many, many discussions, not only among the participants, but here in the council chambers too. I have on my desk an old-fashioned calendar that was given to me last Christmas, the kind that has individual leaves, day leaves, and every night when I leave my office, I pull off that day, and I have been watching as this stack of leaves has been disappearing and the time passing, and every one of those leaves represents a day closer to the rains, and I am really very concerned. The problems we're dealing with ultimately come down to two categories, differences between the property owners over technical, legal requirements, things that are going to consume a lot of time. And the other item is a cost of completion item. And this would be for the Camarillo Springs project as opposed to the Keene project. On Monday, I went into my mediator mode and began contacting the other parties because there seemed to be an impasse. And I'm the one person that everybody seems to be willing to talk to. I'm not sure exactly why. Probably something I got from my son. But, but they will all talk with me. And we had multiple hours of conversations trying to identify the real interests that were blocking us. As a result of those discussions, I drafted a proposal, an outline of a proposal for revisions to the existing agreement to try to get past all of those impasses. And as of now, we've received written confirmation from two of the attorneys saying, yeah, we could do this. Now, Attorney Pirik and I have been working on revisions to the existing agreement, stripping out all of the unnecessary stuff, all of the owner issues, so we can focus on the things that we can do. And I hope that we can have a final agreement to the council for its consideration literally in a matter of days. I hope the mayor will call a special session when the city attorney says, yeah, we have an agreement, whether he's prepared to recommend it or not. And I just want to mention, when Tom was doing his presentation about the roadway, if I can just have a couple more seconds, he pointed out that we're having problems getting things done as inexpensively as we would like to. And we incur costs for supervision. And these are some of the things that Brian and I are sort of wrestling with is how can we address these issues in a way that's responsible both for the city and the contractor. And I think we're really talking about a matter of days, not weeks, but days before we can have a proposal that's presentable to the city for your consideration. And I hope that we can get this done and that Brian can talk to you, Mayor Little, and say, okay, I'm not, we may have to hold our nose, but please call a session and let's consider it. I'll answer any questions you have.
Well, first of all, you're not the only ones pulling off and worrying about the days of the,
I know
of the
that.
calendar.
I know that.
In fact, the project that the city proposed initially would probably be done by now, or pretty close to being done, if the residents and other interested in Camarillo Springs had not decided to put something else on the table, which has been the major user of time since that point has happened. But the city council will meet whenever we have 24-hour notice to meet if that's what it takes. But I've yet to see anything really being coming forth out of that isn't met by some objection from one of the or the other of the parties. So I'm going to wait to see that happen first before I worry about whether we call a council meeting.
But we do have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday.
Yes, we do. Scheduled for November 4th, and we will have I assume we will have an item on the agenda for November 4th with it.
We will have an item, and it will be, with what we're scheduled with, is we're out for one bid proposal, and we will be making a recommendation on the bid, assuming we get some bids in, and that's what the item will be on.
That bid is planned to be taken between now and the 4th.
They're due on the 2nd of November, Monday. We'll open them, and then we'll bring them back to you on the 4th.
Okay.
That's on the Keene plan.
I have a
So,
question.
yes,
Just one
go
real
ahead.
quick. Just, Jim, I just want to make sure I heard you right. You're saying that you're meeting with everybody. Did I hear that? Is that all the players that?
Yes, I have had extensive phone conversations with all of the involved attorneys. We have stripped away those things that can be stripped away. The draft agreement that Mr. Pirik and I are dealing with right now does not include all of those complicated land issues and things like that. Really what we're talking about right now is a pretty straightforward, let's build a project and what's it going to cost and who's going to do it.
Okay.
Leaving all those land issues for somebody else to decide afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jim. We appreciate your comments. We look forward to having something before us by the 4th.
I hope so too.
Okay.
Thank you, members of the council, for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much. See what else.
Do you want to do new business, or do you?
No, I will just wait and do that after.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else to come before this council. We'll adjourn to the study session and the closed sessions. We'll reconvene at 7:30 this evening. Thank you.
No.
You want to call the meeting of the Camarillo City Council to order, and let's have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Craven.
Here.
Councilmember Kildee.
Here.
Councilmember McDonald.
Here.
Vice Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Mayor Little.
Here. Councilman Kildee, would you give us in the flag salute, please?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I'm going to ask Chief Monica McGrath to come forward and to handle this next item.
Good evening, Mayor Little, members of City Council, City staff. Today is October 28, 2015, and today marks the one-year anniversary of the death of Deputy Eugene Kostachenko. As you know, he was killed tragically by an alleged intoxicated driver on Highway 101 near the Lewis on-ramp. Eugene was a true inspiration to all of us that he worked with. He had an enthusiasm for his profession of law enforcement. He also had a great passion for life and his family. He was a beloved family man, and he's survived by his wife, Maura, who lives in the city of Camarillo. Eugene was not only known for his law enforcement skills, but he was known for his kindness, compassion to everybody he touched. Sorry, it's a little difficult. Eugene's dedication to his profession and family was paramount to the way he led his life. We are all richer in many ways to have known and worked with Eugene. On November 6, 2015, the Camarillo Police Station will serve as host to the unveiling of the Highway 101 memorial sign in honor of Eugene's service. Eugene was an incredible person in many respects, and he'll be sorely missed. One thing that I noticed about Eugene was he was one of our highest DUI enforcement officers, and he didn't even work the traffic bureau. So he had a passion for keeping all of us safe. As such, the Thousand Oaks Police Department, the Moore Park Police Department, and us, and it was in the paper today, we received a large grant from the OTS, Office of Traffic Safety. To do just that is to prevent these horrible tragedies from happening, doing more enforcement, doing saturated patrols, educating people, not only pedestrians, bike safety, but all, to prevent these horrible things from happening to anyone. So to honor Eugene, I would like everybody to please stand, and we'll have a moment of silence. Please bow your head. Thank you. And thank you all for supporting all of us in the work we do day in and day out to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your doing this, and I don't think we have to say that we highly value the police department that we have here through the County Sheriff's Department, as well as the service you provide not only to Camarillo but to other cities and to the county itself. So thank you again for everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Okay, we have some public comments for items that are not on the agenda. We'll go start with those. Grace Winter. Please identify yourself for the record, please.
My name is Grace Winner, W-I-N-N-E-R.
Thank you.
I'm a resident of the Bradford apartment complex here in Camarillo. And that is one of my concerns. There's two. My main concern with the Bradford apartments is its habitability or the lack thereof. It had an inspection for building safety, and there were 13 violations that have still yet to be addressed. This was done on June 18th. There's missing and broken handrails, uneven steps, lead paint in the railings, asbestos ceilings. There's been a sewage break that was not cleaned up, and so the units smell like cess. There's been water intrusion damage, and there's mold in the apartments, specifically mine, where my tub had cracked, and they repaired it instead of replaced it, and did not clean up the wet wood, which caused mold, which I'm allergic to, which I have notified them of. My second issue is that there is no place for me to move to with my Section 8 voucher. There's an invalid list that the Area Housing Authority has, but it is inaccurate, outdated. Although the date continues to change, the information on it is not accurate. None of the places on there will accept the Section 8 voucher here in Camarillo. So I'm looking for assistance with the building itself because I have not been able to reside in the building since the end of May. Last time I spent the night in my apartment was May 23rd. I've been on the streets since because when I do go in there, I get sick. I've been looking, trying to find suitable housing for myself, but continue to get rejected because of the Section 8 voucher. I've addressed these issues with the city, building department, and the building safety and code enforcements, and they say, well, we're looking for renovations, towards renovations in the future, but that doesn't get me into suitable housing and off the streets. I'm disabled. I need help. Thank you.
Thank
Your Honor,
you.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
There are different apartments on Bradford, and I'm not familiar with the various street numbers of an ownership. Are you in the Bradford that's owned by the Housing Authority, or does it have a different owner?
It is the Bradford owned by the Housing Authority. I am in the apartment complex on Ponderosa. Each Bradford apartment building, there's 3, have a different address, but they all are on Bradford. There's one on Ponderosa, one on Calle La Sombre, and one on Ripley. The one on Ripley, the roof is falling down, and has been.
Okay, but just to go back to the question I asked.
I apologize.
It's owned by the Area Housing Authority.
Of the County of Ventura.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so how long has this been going on, and you've been in contact with the necessary staff members with the county as well as the city on this issue?
As well as the management, LOMCO, which manages the Mira Vista apartment complex. They repeatedly told me there was no mold. There has been an inspection, and there is mold in that apartment complex.
I have one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
So have you contacted the Area Housing Authority and not just the management company?
Absolutely. I've spoken with Mike Nye many times, asking him for relocation.
Not to get the problems fixed?
He has addressed some of the issues inside the apartment, but the complex has mold. So no matter how much they do to the apartment itself, there's still going to be mold.
Well, you can remove mold.
Sure, but it's inside the walls, inside the building. I'm on the top floor. It's all the way through.
Okay, I'm not going to keep discussing, but there are ways to remove the mold. You remove the
but
the drywall, you Clorox or whatever, but
it's not being done.
That hasn't been done. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll probably have further discussion at.
Yeah, I think we should contact Housing Authority on this and see what they have to say and see where they're going with it.
Council, if I may provide you with some additional information. On your next agenda, you will be considering you'll be holding what's known as a TEFRA hearing for the Bradford apartments, for the Area Housing Authority, to be able to access tax credit funding for the rehab of the Bradford apartments.
Good.
I'd like to ask one. I suggest as a council we turn this over to the city manager to look at it and take care of it. But I'd also like to see if you can contact someone to help this individual have a place to live in between the time, if you are indeed on the streets.
Yes, I am.
Because there are agencies that can help that, and we need to solve that as well.
I would appreciate that very
Why don't we refer this to the
much.
city manager, and we'll have a discussion on it further next week?
Well,
Okay,
Yes,
on the
that
4th
hearing is
of November.
but that's on the rehab. But
understand.
you'll make contacts on.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
Yes.
This particular matter would be referred to the city manager for his follow-up.
Thank you
Ms.
very
Snyder.
much.
Elton Galgally.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'm here representing our family trust, my wife's late parents' home, as you all are, I'm sure, abundantly aware of. It's almost a year tonight. This weekend will be Halloween. That's when this nightmare all started. Only unlike many Halloween nightmares, this has been a real nightmare for others much worse than my wife and I. For a lot of people that had no other options. And there's been very little done. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of people, I really don't know what to say about that. Our situation is, our carpet's going in this weekend after 10 months and a little about over $310,000. But, is that good news to us? Well, I ordered over $500 worth of material, so as soon as it's done, I can board up the house in order to try to protect it from an onslaught. We've talked a lot about this bid, this proposal, that proposal. Sometimes it changes in the middle of the week when no one knows anything about it, including every member of the City Council. It's a sad state of affair. One issue that I would like to have the council address is there is a temporary road that was put in after the Halloween event last year that if you stand up there, you can see the crosshairs with a diversion of what that road did to divert the flow directly to our house and the one next to us, and then the one next to that it ricocheted off of. I was told in February by members on this council individually that's going to be taken care of. Can we just get past a couple months in case we need access again? Then I was told in April, after we're past that, after we released, there's no more emergency, right? I was one of those that said I thought we should keep that on, but everybody says no more emergency. So we released that. But the road still wasn't taken down. I was told a month ago it was coming out, they can't use it any longer. The crosshairs are still there. And I would just like to say and appeal to you that if I wasn't concerned, I wouldn't be ordering boards like in a hurricane and hope that that'll hold it back. I appeal to you to keep your word and get that road out. You say there's no need for it. It was going to be removed. Why isn't it removed? It's a year now, and the emergency's over. And I do thank all of you. I consider all of you for the last 25 years my personal friend. But to say that there's not some disappointments wouldn't be true.
Questions? All right. Barbara Williams.
Barbara Williams. I have been silent, hoping the process would work and the Camarillo Springs project would have started by now. I am extremely grateful for all the work that has been done to date. We finally had all the parties come to the table, and the stakeholders all realized that something needed to be done. That was a big undertaking, and to keep the momentum going has been tough. Unfortunately, that's not enough. The people of Camarillo Springs are desperate for the work to start. They are very, very afraid. Saturday is the first anniversary of the first debris flow, and residents fear every report of rain is going to be the next one. All experts agree we have a problem. They all agree additional mitigation is needed ASAP. Not one expert has said we are safe. We have a deadline, and it could be a week, and it could be 4 weeks, but we can't afford to gamble people's safety and well-being. We have a plan. We have the majority of the detailed specifications. We have the funding approved, but we don't have a signed and approved agreement. Time ran out a month ago. Even if things started tomorrow, we're talking the end of November. By that time, it could be too late. Do we need another debris flow and people's homes destroyed to get things going? I sincerely hope not, and I know you don't want that either. Today, one of the residents told me that patience is turning into frustration and anger, and I thought you should know that. I'm asking that all parties put their differences aside and sign the agreement for the people of Camarillo Springs. I'm asking the City Council to force a resolution of this matter for the people, for their safety and welfare. These are people who have put everything into their homes. They are citizens of Camarillo who pay the same taxes as their neighbors across the freeway in Mission Oaks. There's a high probability we will have rain within the next month, and with nothing done yet, it is going to be costly to clean up and more people will be displaced. Heaven forbid if someone is hurt or killed because nothing has been done to further mitigate the problems on Conejo Mountain. Now, I would like to ask the City of Camarillo to help us out. Since nothing has started, I'm asking the city to help us determine where the K-rails need to be placed to help divert the flows that will come before the mitigation work is done. I'm asking for your help to get them in place before the next rain. Time is of the essence, and we can't wait any longer. Please help. Remember, on December 12th, it was 0.93 or 9300ths of an inch in 15 minutes that caused tons of debris to come down and bring the total of red-tagged homes to 10. Yes, we are still going to be evacuating people, and we'll start with the same thresholds as last year. Conejo Mountain is still considered a first-year burn, and flooding and debris flows are a reality for us. Thank you, and I do appreciate all the work that is done for us and for all the long hours people have been working trying to get the Camarillo Springs project started. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? I have a comment. You know, 2 months ago, the city was prepared to embark on a project to put in catchments up there on the hill, and it was as if we were proposing to go up there and scrawl obscenities on it, and therefore, and then coming from Camarillo Springs, the people out there was absolutely opposed to it, wanted us to do something different. In fact, came forward with something different, and we accepted a lot of things on face value that have not occurred, frankly, on behalf of people who are associated with the Camarillo Springs or the area. And so for us to, we're trying to do what we can. We started out, you know, to drain the swamp, and now we find ourselves where we are. But it really was the fact that we had a proposal, and the people out there, or a lot of people out there, didn't like it and wanted something different. So that's where we are, and so we're trying to resolve it now. And I will tell you, on November 4th, we have another council meeting on November 4th, and that item will be on the agenda to decide what we're going to do once and for all. I think all of us are as tired as you are of going back and forth and some of the games that some of the people out there are playing. So just so that so you know where at least one member of the council is, and I'm sure I speak for others.
Mayor Little, I appreciate your concern, but you have to remember with a cane project, as we commonly call it, or the debris we were going to be required to handle the maintenance. And the maintenance for the debris fences was a nightmare because it required specialized cleaning techniques and it's not something that you can just hire anybody who can go take a grader and go up and clean out a debris platform because of those high fences and the fact that it could become a safety issue. That's why we were opposing that solution, and that's why we are supporting the Camarillo Springs project, because it's a much more easily maintained project using conventional equipment and people who are in the community and can handle it. And so, you know, that's why we were supporting that one. We were grateful for all the work that had been done, but we couldn't afford to do the maintenance on the Kane project, and that's why we were not supporting it.
Well, I think further investigation has revealed that there are ways that can be handled much easier than what was initially thought.
Right. But we couldn't afford to do it, and that was the problem.
Well, all right. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. Hal Hyper? I'm sorry, I can't read the last name. Hal, you'll have to give us your last name.
It's Hal Hyman, Hyman.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
And I live at 6473 San Como Lane. I didn't expect speakers to be here tonight to talk pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Just wanted to start off and say, people on San Como Lane, there are people that live on San Como Lane. They don't live in a storage room somewhere. They live in houses. The ones that are still living on the street. Some of them are working hard to repair their homes. But I don't have to tell you, they're all worried to death now. And every day that goes by now, there's more and more angst, worry. You just have to be there to see. That's San Como Lane. I assume the congressman was speaking for the people on Gatana, and there are people on Irina. I really came here to let you know that we appreciated all you did. You had to be there last year, and many of you were, seeing all the agencies working together to clean things up. We knew we were in good hands with the Camarillo City Council. But with the mitigation stuff that nobody could hear anything about, everything was secret, that's part of the mediation technique that they use. People began to lose trust because they didn't hear anything. Our representatives there couldn't say anything. They were obligated not to say anything. Now, between the last time you met and tonight, we haven't heard anything. We haven't heard a darn thing. Wouldn't it be nice if the city manager sent a note out to the people in that community that are affected, saying, this is where we're at, this is where we're going, things are happening, these are the things that are happening, we're meeting on the 4th of November, we're with you 100%. Is that hard to do? Give us information. We want to trust you. You've come through for us before, and we know deep in our heart you will again. But we're worried. We saw what happened on Interstate 5 and Highway 58. It scared the daylights out of all of us. So could you get something out to us? We don't want to wait till the 4th. We want something out like yesterday, letting us know what's happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Matthew Lorimer.
I have a couple things to talk tonight. I do want to say something about Camarillo Springs. I've been going to city council for many years. You know, each of you councilmen took an oath to solve problems and issues in a community. It's not easy, and it takes hard work. You can't pass it off to the city manager. You can't pass it off to staff. You need to Get with these people, all the parties. Sit down, provide lunch, breakfast, and dinner. Sit down. If it takes 2 days, clear your schedule and get it done. You know, behind you is an American flag. We don't give up. That's what makes us different. Americans. We push through. We get things done. We don't make excuses, no matter how hard things get. I urge the city council. This isn't a complaint against you. This is about you individually. When you go home tonight, ask yourself a question. Maybe you should step up to the plate, clear your plate, sit down with all the parties and get this done. 1 year is enough. Okay, I urge you to step forward. What are you going to say if lives are lost? We couldn't make a deal? Really, it's time to step forward and lead with leadership. Please, do it for the people behind you. They're retired. They come here many times. They need to have a sense that somebody cares. Please do. The next thing I want to talk about the Lamplighter Mobile Home Park. Last time, there's some questions brought up. The park was bought in 2010 by IPG. Rent used to be $750. And then it went in 2014 to $1,029. Now it's $1,225, which is a $196 increase. It's outrageous. This park owner continues to raise the rent in many fashions. Before we said we need a rent stabilization program, you told me exactly, go to the rent review board. I did that. I made my case. They listened to me. They gave me 1.7, and the owner wouldn't honor it. He said, I didn't approve of it. He showed up and didn't do it. We need binding arbitration or rent stabilization because the system no longer works. I kept hearing over time, 30 years, it's worked great for 30 years. Well, guess what? 30 years have passed. It's no longer working. Imagine that kind of increase. We've gone from $750 in 5 years to $1,225. You tell me what court is going to have a problem with the city doing a rent stabilization ordinance. And by the way, a city did step up with the same information provided you. We are doing research on how they came to the conclusion that they could do rent control for 22 parks, yet we can't do it for 3. You know, people are limited on incomes. This is an issue that needs to be revisited, and we plan to continue the fight because it's unacceptable to take advantage of people and gouge them. If you have any questions on the information above you, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I do, Your Honor, just to make sure I understand. So on the increase from the 1029 to the 1225, 196 of that is rent, and then the difference is they've started making, or requesting, or demanding, whatever the right word is, that the tenants pay for trash and sewer?
That's what, yeah, exactly. That's what's going, it's exactly $196. Yeah.
Is the
Last
rent
time it was
increase.
confusing the way I did it. So.
Okay. And then the other, plus the sewer, plus the trash.
196 plus 70, or 196 includes the 70? 35 and 35 is 70.
Okay, yeah, it's 1225, and then the 196, and then there's 35 for trash, 35 sewer, which would bring it to 266.
So the important part is the 196 is the rent increase.
The rent increase, yeah, in 1 year.
And in under the prior owner, you didn't have to pay for trash or sewer.
Or under this one either until
this increase.
Yeah,
Okay.
and like I said, this is, I mean, the highest increase. And I just talked to another mobile home park that's owned by IPG, and they got an $80 increase. And so, I mean, it's just, I got to tell you, it's just, I don't know about you, but I don't know people getting that kind of increase in a year. That's just outrageous. So
I have a question.
I don't know what else to tell you. I'm going to do some more studies and get you information.
Find out in those other parks, since you're doing the studying, find out about the trash and sewer, whether they were paying or not, because a big piece of that is your trash and sewer. So
yeah,
let us know about that when you come back.
Yeah, I will get that information. I don't have it. Unfortunately, I was sick. I know Charlotte asked, on you last time, I believe. So,
yes,
it was the same question, Matt. Was the trash and sewer, was that always part of the rent, or is this an increase?
Yeah, it was always part of the rent, and also cable was included. Now, I can't prove it yet, but some people are saying they're paying for cable now, which technically they're not supposed to do. But again, I have to verify that because, again,
okay,
I have to gather more facts.
Anything else? Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you.
Linda Hilton. Hilton.
Excuse me. Linda Fisher Helton, Community Relations Manager with the Area Housing Authority. Good evening. As you may have heard already this evening, rental units in Camarillo and across the county are in very short supply, and there is a tremendous demand for affordable units. While this situation cannot be remedied quickly, the Area Housing Authority is doing everything it can to preserve rental units, all rental units, not just designated affordable units, as the county prepares for the El Nino season ahead. The Area Housing Authority is hosting a workshop for landlords called Tools for Landlords Preparing for El Nino on November 4th for all rental property owners and managers across the county. Our goal is to assist owners and managers to understand the implications and considerations when facing an El Nino season. We've assembled a panel of experts, including Eric Bolt from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Gil Zavlo-Daver from the Ventura County Office of Emergency Services, Captain Norm Plott from the Ventura County Fire Department, along with local stormwater and water mitigation experts. We know firsthand the loss of even a few rental units in such a tight rental market will have significant impacts on the households who must relocate due to roof, wind, or water damage. We believe that through our outreach and awareness efforts, we are lessening the impact that El Nino can have in our community. The workshop is November 4th from 8 a.m. to 11:30 at the Ventura County Community Foundation building. We're still accepting RSVPs, though we expect the workshop to be at capacity in the next day or so. I'd like to thank city staff for their support and assistance in assembling this expert panel and their guidance in this process. I thank you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Where's that going to be held again?
Ventura County Community Foundation, VCCF, building on Mission Oaks Boulevard.
Okay. What time?
8 a.m.
There's a thing at your, Mike,
Pardon me?
this thing, you've got
Oh, okay.
one.
Anyway, you got it.
Okay.
For the public's sake, you just gave it to him. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one other card. It's Carrie Lysek, Moxie Salon.
Hi, excuse me if I'm unprepared. I found out about this meeting at 4:57 when I was in the city, and that's just kind of the way I do things. My business I opened by myself as a single mom in Camarillo, and it's called Moxie Hair and Design Studio on Ventura Boulevard. It's been very successful for 5.5 years. I did not plan on opening it. I just wanted a place by myself, and it worked out. And I think it's just from, sorry, I'm just going to tell a little bit about myself, but my roots in Camarillo. I've been on the board for Old Town Camarillo for the past 2 years, the PTO for Los Primeros Structured School. Both my parents, my great-grandparents, my grandparents all have been part of Camarillo and business, so I'm very passionate about Camarillo. So I received a letter from the city regarding section 19.25.080, minimum yard requirements. Complaint regarding pedicures done on outdoor raised up, paid for lease patio on October 22nd, and I stopped doing those on October 23rd, the second I found out. And I do have a pedicure area in my salon, but we do pedicures outside on the patio, which is not visible to the public because it's raised up. It looks the same as seating and sitting out there. For people with allergies, just some people can't be in a salon, and we are the only salon in Camarillo that actually pays for a patio. And I know it's a very tricky situation because it's not within the, I don't know, the regulations, ordinance, but how do I go about making this space that I lease and pay for and use to help people with allergies, some of them, not all of them, outdoor pedicures, how do I make that work without too much, I mean, just how do I make that work? I'm looking for some guidance from you guys.
Okay.
Could we have
Joe?
to ask a question, we have a planning person here that can talk to you.
Joe, you want to?
I'm actually aware of this situation, and we were looking forward to reaching out to you to
Thank you.
address this ongoing scenario. We appreciate the fact that you addressed the letter and
Absolutely.
stopped the issue. So I have a business card here I can give to you, and we can set up a meeting.
Okay. And can I just point out one thing? The patio had been used prior for 4 years by my neighbor, that she rents part of it and I rent part of it. And the city's never brought it to attention, but it's been something that's been used for the past 4 years. And when I looked into the lease, I saw, wow, I can do that out there too, and specialize for our clients with allergies. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Mr. Vaca will have someone out there tomorrow talking to him. Okay, thank you very much. That's all the cards I have. Anyone else wish to be heard on anything? It's not on the agenda.
Your Honor,
Yeah.
could I just have a question, and maybe it's for Mr. Perrick, but and I don't know the sensitivity of this, but there seems to be some questions about the Cam Springs and the information. Is the information, the amount of information that we can really talk about, is it getting out to those individuals that it needs to get out to?
Well, in fact, we've had several meetings of the City Council with agenda reports which have been describing the status of the Camarillo Springs matter, including a draft of the agreement that was referenced tonight and what it looked like at that point in time. There have been continuing negotiations since that draft agreement was circulated. I worked with Mr. Lingle, the attorney for the association, the last several months, and almost all day today. It has been, have given this a very high priority and are doing everything we can to see whether an agreement can be reached. And there's an alternative if an agreement cannot be reached that the council originally approved, as Mayor Little mentioned, on September 9th, but then came back on September 23rd. Again, this was in an open council meeting with an agenda report. It was a fully public process. So we have had meetings over the course of the last few months, several meetings here at the City Council discussing the Camp Springs project, what the status of the project was, and what the council was doing to address those issues. So I believe that it's been full information has been available to the residents through the public process, and I can confirm as I speak here that Mr. Lingle was here earlier tonight. I spoke with him after the break and told him I'd be calling him first thing in the morning. So this is getting our full attention and will continue to, as Mayor Little mentioned, November 4th, this is going to be coming back to the council for a decision on either going forward with the Kane project or consideration of the agreement for the Camarillo Springs project.
Unfortunately, the person who raised the issue left before it could be answered. So
too bad.
Well, maybe they're listening on TV or something. Who knows?
Mr. Mayor and council members, if I could also add, and it is unfortunate the resident did leave, and hopefully somebody here can relay the information of what Mr. Perrick just said, but if I could add also, there are some legal issues that are going on with this item, so we have to be obviously careful to protect the city. But there are a number of board members for the common area HOA, along with the 5 homeowner associations, that really the residents, I would encourage them to go talk with their board members. That's why they elected them to represent them. And if they do go talk with them, Barbara Williams was here as an example this evening, and she would have the discretion and judgment on what information that they can share with her, with the residents. That would really not be our responsibility. In addition to what Mr. Perrick said, we've had a number of Camarillo Springs town hall meetings, so to speak, with the group. Not as many as probably most would prefer, but we have had a couple community meetings with the Springs folks as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think if nothing else, we'll now turn back to our agenda and move to item 18, which is public hearings. The first is an ordinance amending municipal code 14.12, water conservation measures and resolution redeclaring a stage 2 water shortage condition and imposing additional conservation measures. Can we have
Yes, Your Honor. 2 weeks ago at your last City Council meeting, we did have a presentation on this item as the first part of the public hearing, with the idea then that we would bring back any responses to any comments and be prepared to present for final action the item tonight. And so I'm going to go through, we provided the presentation 2 weeks ago that was fairly in-depth and took some time. I'm going to go through a shorter version of that tonight and try and just hit the high points to recap what we discussed 2 weeks ago. So with that, I'll start by again reminding that the city does not serve water to the entire community. We have a service area that makes up roughly 2/3 of the community. The areas that we don't serve are served by other water districts. So the item before you tonight is dealing with the water code that really only applies to the Camarillo service area, highlighted up on the map in pink. We have a number of strategies to protect our water supply. The one that the item tonight really applies to is our goal to make sure that new water connections, new customers do not impact current customers, and that's probably the simplest way that I can say it. We do have a more extensive explanation of a policy that basically we can talk about new development. It must either through water rights or offsets or some type of program, it does need to offset the new demand that it's going to create on our water supply. And so historically we've had a program in place where for most of the development that's been approved in the past, water rights transfer to cover their demand, and we will continue with that policy. However, it has been temporarily impacted because of the governor's executive order for water conservation throughout the state. It's kind of changed the rules temporarily where there's a cap on our water supply, and even though we might have water rights transferred to us, we are not allowed to use those. They don't count against the cap, for example. So because of that, we've had to develop a temporary strategy to respond to the new rules by the governor's executive order, and that's really the focus of what the rest of the presentation will explain. There's two parts to address this temporary measure. One is to make sure that any new development, any new customers are at least very water efficient. They use every type of feature available to minimize their water demand. And then, of course, they're still going to have a water demand, and so how do we offset that remaining demand? And that would be through a proposed water credit program. And there's this table that's up on the screen. I'm not going to go through that. That was really just to illustrate that there's a lot of information out there to identify through different types of conservation strategies, depending on which strategy you use, how much for every dollar invested can you expect to see in a water reduction. And using that information, we applied that to what we already have experience with, and that is three main categories that we've already participated through a rebate program with Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas. That is to look at creating more drought-tolerant landscapes. There's various features involved with that. It would also be to implement low-flow fixtures, faucets, shower heads, and so on in homes that are high water users. And then also to look at old appliances that are not efficient and replacing those with more water efficient appliances. So building from that, at our last presentation we went through a calculation, basically a math process to come up with what we refer to as a water credit amount, and that would be for $8,825. That would reduce demand by an acre foot with that investment, and that would be on an that acre foot reduction would be a one-time payment, but every year we would see that savings in 1 acre foot. I'm not going to go through the math tonight, so this is one of those, I guess, tests where I don't have to show my work. But we just will build from the $8,800 to explain then how that would get applied. And we do have the backup information to document how we arrived at the 8,800. However, going forward, if we identify what the cost is to reduce demand, then we need to also estimate when there's new development, what type of demand for water are they going to create. And so this is an example on the residential side. We have typically 4 main categories of different types of residential, ranging from single family with typical yards all the way down to apartments. And depending on the type of residential unit, the amount of water used differs. And so obviously a house with a reasonable size yard is going to use more water because in those cases almost half of the water use is for outdoor landscape. Whereas when you get to apartments, there's less landscape and also typically less indoor use. So with that in mind, we have some default factors that we've identified through various resources that show pretty consistently what we would expect the demand to be for those types of units. I'll run through an example in a little bit here. And just to give a sense to turn a number that people aren't used to seeing into something that makes more sense, is with a single family with an average yard, it's roughly a little over a third, 0.35 acre feet. That would be the annual demand that you would expect to see from that house. And the fee that would be associated with that would be taking that, multiplying it times the 8,800, and that would be just a little over $3,000 that development would have to pay for that unit to offset their water demand. We also have commercial and industrial use, and we would use a different resource to estimate their demand than using the defaults as we have for residential. Instead, for commercial and industrial, we would look at a water impact study, which is pretty much required for any type of industrial and commercial project in the city. That's where they have to conduct a study to look at what type of water demand they're estimated to create and where they expect to find a water resource to offset that demand. From those water impact studies, we now would have a number of that would be their estimated demand, but many of those studies were prepared back before we had more water efficient requirements, and so the estimated amount of water use is probably higher than what the project is really going to use. So we do also include a provision that if a project can show substantial evidence that they are going to be providing water savings features and that their use is going to be less than what was in their water impact study, we are willing to review that. And again, if it is compelling information, we will take that into consideration. So with that in mind, with the amount of development that could move forward over the next several years, and again, depending how long the drought is and how long the governor's restrictions are in place, this program could raise as much as $2.5 million that could be applied towards water conservation. So we'll talk a little bit about, okay, now that we have a revenue source that's likely to come in, how will we use that? And again, I'm just going to recap with a quick example to show how we would generate that revenue. Let's assume we have a residential project with 300 single-family dwelling units. We would use that category, single family, to compare against the default, the estimated amount of use per single family, which would be 0.35 acre feet per year. And then we would multiply the 300 units times that factor to get a total demand, annual demand of 105 acre feet. We would then multiply the 105 acre feet times the $8,825, and that development would be required to pay almost $1 million, $926,000 into the water conservation program to help offset water demand. In your packet and in the resolution, there's a resolution for this water credit program. There's an equation that's written out, and that is basically representing the equation that I just showed you numerically. And that would be the water demand, in this case would be the 105 acre feet, times the water credit amount, and that's going to be the $8,800. And that would equate to then what the water demand offset requirement would be for that development. So I just use this to illustrate the equation that you have in your packet. So revenues being generated, how do we plan to use that revenue to create real benefits? And that would be split into two categories. One would be a rebate program that would be significant enough to definitely entice participation to reduce, have high water users participate in programs to replace their high water use with features that are more water effective. And as an example, the city has invested about $30,000 a year into recently into programs for rebates, and obviously through the program that we're proposing, we could be generating hundreds of thousands of revenue of dollars to apply to this program, which would show a significant increase in opportunity to reduce water demand. As a second category, we would also identify high water users in our service area and look to work with them to find ways to reduce their demand. This, as I mentioned, would be enacted through a resolution. The general policy changes to the water code are by ordinance. As I wrap up this presentation, I'll go through again the different actions that are being recommended. But the ordinance will really set policy, and then the resolution will add the more specific information. That's because if we ever need to change some of the details, it's easier to do that through resolution in the future rather than have to go back and amend the entire ordinance. The resolution does include a provision that this would be reviewed in 6 months. That's very timely because that would be in March, and in the governor's executive order is due to expire in February. We expect that there'll be some type of review and probably some type of modification to those goals and the requirements that the states put into effect because of those goals. So we need to review that to see how business is expected to be conducted in 6 months and make changes if needed to adapt to that. The fees that have to be, or they're not fees, the contributions that will have to be made into our conservation program, and the reason, and I want to make that distinction that it's not a fee, is this is one option that developers can use to fulfill their demand. There are other options available to them that they've had as well, but if they choose to participate in this program, they would have to make the contribution prior to getting a water will serve letter. And a will serve letter is essentially that permit that we grant to say you now have access to water from our system. And that is typically, that will serve letter is issued when the project is ready to start grading. The first part of their construction is to grade the site and then eventually build the structures. In order to start the grading, they need the will serve letter, and that's when the contributions would be collected in order for them to move forward. The funds would be kept in a separate account. The account would be just for this program to make sure that we identify the revenue coming in and can track to make sure that it's being applied to real benefits that are creating water reduction or water demand reduction. And then this is something that will obviously take some time to implement and to manage, and the city, we don't have availability amongst the current staff that's available to manage this program at the city, so that we would look to a consultant to manage the program. So just quickly identifying some of the key scope items that the consultant would manage. They would be helping to create as simple of a communication and outreach program to the community as possible, to our water customers. There have been and probably will be programs with the Metropolitan Water District for rebates, and we're looking to create a local rebate program. Rather than trying to go online and figure out how to obtain the rebates from Metropolitan and how to figure out how to get the rebates from the city, the consultant would provide a one-stop shop where a person could come in and somebody will walk them through all the steps and help manage it for them to make it as easy as possible to access opportunities for water reduction. There's obviously going to need to be some guidelines established. We're not just going to hand over funds to somebody and expect that they'll perform. There need to be certain commitments in place to make sure that performance is achieved. There are some guidelines already that Metropolitan has established, and we would build from that. We would certainly need to identify and reach out to our higher water customers, and that's the consultant would help with that. And very important, we want to make sure that we're monitoring the use of those funds to make sure that real solutions are occurring and that the water reductions, measured water reductions are occurring. And then the expectation is that at the time that a will serve letter is issued, so that's when the contributions would be collected, usually it's at least a year, if not longer, before the grading, the structures are constructed, and water demand actually starts to occur. So as long as we have the solutions in place within a year, that will create the reduced water demand before the new water demand from the development would ever occur. And that's that's something that realistic and not easy to achieve, but can be achieved. We saw last year, for example, that in Camarillo, alone through the Cayugas and Metropolitan rebate program, over $600,000 worth of rebates were used in Camarillo, and that produced real results. So that shows that there is a demand out there for these programs. So what occurred on October 14th is we reviewed the proposed changes to our, I call it our water code. It's a ordinance amending certain features in our water conservation program. That was also reviewed with a resolution that would call for a redeclaring of Stage 2. In our conservation program, we have 4 stages of conservation, and we're currently in a Stage 2. However, because the proposed changes to the ordinance would amend some of the provisions in Stage 2, if you do take action on the ordinance, then you would also need to redeclare our Stage 2 conservation program in order to implement the new provisions. And then we took comments and to touch on maybe 3 of the key comments that we discussed. One was there was a concern about car washes. We do know that the businesses that run their own car wash, they recycle the water, and there wasn't perhaps as much concern over the water use there because it's very efficient. However, there was a concern over self-serve car washes. People use the water. How is that being controlled? How much water are they using? The good news there is that the self-serve car washes that we have are hooked up to the sewer system rather than the storm drain system, so that water doesn't go into a normal storm drain and run out to the creek. It actually goes into our sewer system, goes to our plant, and is recycled. And right now, at least during the summer with the heavy water use, 100%, several days we've reached that goal of 100% of the water that we're recycling has been used. So at least this water is going back into being used again. There was also a concern raised by the swimming pool construction industry that they presented some points that they felt that the way pools replace lawns and other water-using features in a yard, that there is an offset, and therefore trying to restrict and not allow new pools is a hardship. And so while at the last meeting we had not at that time proposed any changes to the ordinance, tonight we have updated that, and so in your packet in the ordinance there is some proposed language change that will allow new pools to move forward. They would just have to, like any other new water user, contribute to the water conservation program as one option. They still have the other option of if they, which they had mentioned at the last meeting, if they have the ability to access water from another source and not use our water, they can do that as well. But at least we've now introduced a new opportunity for them to be able to move forward with pool construction and have another solution available to them. And then lastly, there was a concern about wanting some clarity to make sure that we're talking about, when we say new water users, it's new connections rather than new service, because if somebody had turned their service off and turns it back on, is that considered new service when they really were always having a right to water in the first place? So what we really want to do is emphasize, and through clarity we've changed the language to say new connections in the document. So those, I think, address the primary comments that we received. So tonight then, what's before you is reviewing again the same ordinance amendment with some of these revisions that we've talked about, and so that's in your packet and before you tonight for consideration. We also have, again, the resolution redeclaring Stage 2, and then we have a third resolution And that goes into what I presented tonight on the water credit program and memorializes that so that if you do take action on the ordinance, then we would also recommend you take action on the resolutions to re-declare Stage 2 and then to put the water credit program in place to create the mechanism to carry out the changes of the ordinance. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Your Honor.
Yes.
You know, first of all, I think it was good that we brought this back. I think it's good that we did the two-part last time and brought it back this time. And I thank you for making the changes that you made. You mentioned the changes regarding swimming pools, but they also talked about spas. And did I read correctly that spas do not have to make the contribution?
That is correct. In the document, the previous language had identified pools and spas, and now spas have been there's a strikeout, so those are no longer part of the document, and spas are no longer controlled under the conservation program.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question. Tom, you talked about this program getting, upon this going into effect and funds being generated and these credits being provided. And we hiring a consultant to undertake that program. Do you have any timetable if from the time we say we adopt it tonight that we could have something in place?
We would expect in probably the next couple meetings to bring to you authority to go out with an RFP to seek that, and then probably by January have a consultant contract in front of you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, any further comments? Otherwise, we'll have open this to a public hearing. We have some cards, and we'll call them out. Lynn Schwenk. Lynn?
Hello, my name is Lynn Schwabe. I'm a resident here in Camarillo. Quick background on myself. I've been a California resident for almost my entire life. I have a master's in water resource management. I am passionate about water conservation. And I am going to come out and say I applaud a lot of the creativity that is presented in this. I love the idea of the increased rebates. I love the idea of a local rebate system. We're in the process of waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks for our big rebate. But I don't think that it goes far enough. And one of the things that I want to bring to your attention is that all of these measures include groundwater. And there's this talk of groundwater transfer. You have a development that comes in that's on something that used to be ag, that those water rights are transferred in. I don't know if you guys have gone and looked into or if the council is aware of the state of groundwater in the Ventura area, but it was designated as a natural disaster area. Fox Canyon Groundwater Basin they are working on a plan right now. They have a draft out to really study and find out how much water is in there or how much water is not in there, how much water can go back in. I know that the Oxnard Basin is, when you look at the area closer towards the shore, that you've already got the water table below sea level. And once you look at that, you're looking at things like saltwater intrusion, you're looking at ground subsidence, you're looking at things where that water doesn't come back. And so the groundwater in the area, Ventura has had issues where they've been banking groundwater for a while. And they say, we've been putting money in. We've been dumping our wastewater into the groundwater, so we're going to take it out. This was their stash. This was the squirrels with the acorns, and they went back in to take their acorns out, and it was, whoa, sorry, too much unrelated swiping of the acorns from the water stash. I like analogies. You can't have that. And the thing is that it's been unregulated for so long. UC Davis came out with a study recently. California groundwater allocations are like 5 times what we can actually provide. So you're looking at a really, really slow recharge time, and you've been looking at groundwater as this draw. It's this patch. People want to forget that there's a drought. They don't necessarily want to conserve. But I think that if you include groundwater in these calculations, that we're setting ourselves up for a big, big, big problem. You want to add on 1,500 new residents that are already super shaved thin on their water usage. If we have a continuation of this drought, how are you going to shave 40% off of the already reduced usage from these new residents? Does that make sense? So if you look at we're thinking the drought's going to end in maybe the next 5 or 10 years. I'd like to point out that the water budget for the Southwest was based off of the early part of the 1900s, which was the wettest year on record. They've done tree ring studies, and that was the wettest, 20 years on record, 100 years on record, over 1,000 years. So we're looking at having to have this really big conversation within the Southwest about water. So don't use groundwater in your calculations. And then I'd like you to wait not until March, but until May, when the Fox
Finish up.
Canyon Groundwater Basin study does come out, so that we know what the state is of this bank account that you guys want to draw out of.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you know anything about what we plan to do with the desalter and things of that nature?
Yes, I do.
What I heard nothing about that. 70% of our water is going to come from that source. And we're getting rid of bad water, turning it into good. That bad water is influencing our drinking water right now.
Yes.
Okay? We're doing a good thing.
There are great things
And
happening. Yes.
we're using a lot. We're not using saltwater intrusion. That doesn't come here. Okay? This is brine water coming from up north. You know where it comes from? Brine water that we're going to be doing.
No, I don't.
It comes from Simi Valley. It comes down the creek, spreads out in Camarillo.
Yes.
But now we've got a resource to use as water. And we're going to do it. We're lucky because a lot of those other cities haven't got that. But I want you to know 70% of our water is going to not come from down there. I'm sorry. I don't get any more of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Dennis Hargrave.
Good evening, Mayor Little, members of the City Council, Dennis Hardgrave. I wanted to just speak for a couple of minutes tonight saying that what you've been working on with staff over the last, 4 months now is a really rational and practical solution that actually has real public benefit. We talk a lot in this city about public benefit, and I think this is one of the highest public benefit things to direct individuals that we can come up with because it can help people in a way that this fabulously oversubscribed MWD program did. I mean, if you look at, they could have probably given away $700 million if they would have had it. But I think it's a great local program. I think it's especially smart to have it managed by the city as opposed to having people come up with their own way of saying, look, I think maybe I got rid of some water use, or I've covered some. I think it's a lot more controllable process to do. I would say from work we've done both with the Village at the Park HOA and working on other projects that are currently going through water supply assessments for CEQA documents, that you have used figures in your methodology calculations that are conservative in your favor. Let's put it that way. In other words, the water use amounts that you're using are actually higher than we're finding in new homes with code for plumbing fixtures and everything else, and assuming the appliances that go in. So I think you've used good defensible numbers. There are people who have spoken up here who thought it was a bad precedent to make on behalf of the community. Well, they weren't from the community, and I would say that the people that are actively involved in, as you've heard from several of us, think that this is a rational way to be able to move forward. Ultimately, I am hopeful that the GMA transfer system will be reestablished. I think we can all expect that it'll look different however it reappears, and nobody will be completely happy with how it looks. But I think ultimately the solution, as Mr. Morgan mentioned, for our own water use within our district is going to be coming from elsewhere as well. Lastly, I just want to make one final comment about the recycled water that we're now using at Village at the Park. If you've noticed with all the purple signs up everywhere, we're finally getting, in the HOA, we're getting people not panicking because they see that the lawns are getting green. They realize that we are using the recycled water. The berm's looking better. The trees are actually blooming. You're seeing a lot of new growth on the Ukes. So I'd say from an HOA perspective, we're very thankful for that. And we're also seeing people in the new phase putting in the drought-tolerant landscape, if you've noticed, that the city's requiring. So thank you very much. I'm here for any questions you may have.
Any questions of Dennis Hargrave? Thank you very much. Jose Solo Rio.
I got this so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jose Solorio with the Association of Pool and Spa Professionals. I want to thank the mayor, the council, the staff for addressing our concerns. I particularly want to also thank the Assistant City Manager, Norman, for helping us and being responsive by phone. I think the resolution for our industry is a win-win. I think for the small businesses in your area that are in the industry, they benefit. The residents that have a pool or spa will benefit because it'll be less money to truck in water. That's also good for the environment, not having to truck in water from another city. And then it's also a win for the city and the water credit program. It is very innovative. I actually recently, after this meeting, this resolution, met with the Metropolitan Water District and shared your idea with them, and they also thought it was outstanding. So you're taking some great leadership, and just here to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Matt Lorimer.
Here's a copy. Regarding the desalter Mr. Morgan was talking about, it doesn't exist now, and when it does, we'll measure it. But thank you for keep bringing it up every time. What you have in front of you is the August 25th, the Drought Long-Term Solutions. And this was by Bill Little, City Manager. Now, it says here, this drought is different. It's one of the most severe on record. Because of this, we are seeing unprecedented and restrictions at the state and the city levels. And you want to build homes? You're telling us in your own words that. Paragraph 3, we are all in this together.
I think I was saying that as the mayor, Matt, not as city manager.
Oh,
okay.
The mayor, Mr. Mayor. Formerly the city manager. We are all in this together. Even as an El Nino materializes, the winters may predict it won't be enough to replenish our aquifers and reduce our regulations and limit access to state water and close this pamphlet. The council several times says, I can't wait for an El Nino. In here, Mr. Little says that it's not going to make a difference. You know, you say one thing and you do another thing. The idea of building homes and the way we're at now, let me remind you, this drought is different. It's one of the most severe on record. So if it's one of the most severe on record, and you put it in writing and you say that, and you hand that to people, you got to kind of wonder, all of a sudden, after July 22, you say we need to stop building homes, then you change your thing because the developers show up, because I was the only one here from the public, and they start saying, oh, we can't do that, you know, we got millions of dollars. Nothing's even built yet. The bottom line is we are in a serious drought. And, you know, we keep talking about a desal plant. I think that's great. But you know something? It's not here. It's fantasy land. Until it's built, until we measure what it's going to cost residents, we need to know. Also, I think we should know is how much the rates are going to go up. If you go on the internet, cities that have more and more savings, they pass the costs on because the water increases, basically. The bill increases 10 to 20%. Where's the statistic on that? And you know, you're throwing around statistics. I said this before. How many people are going to move in that house? Near Village of the Park, in some of those new homes, you have up to 3 families who are moving in a particular house to make the payment. Therefore, the calculations are not always correct. But again, we don't know because we're not sure. We're throwing around statistics again. These statistics about how much water these homes are going to be used, can you provide us with some background of where you got those statistics? Is there other cities that have built the same amount of houses and they have the same amount of results? I'd like to see that. If you do, Tom Fox, please email me. You have my email. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. Hillary Ling.
Mayor Little, City Council and staff and City Manager. My name is Hillary Ling.
Dr. Ling, could you pull that down, please, and speak
Right
into
down,
the
there you go.
microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Hillary Ling. I live in Somas, and I've been a retired dentist for over 40-some years, and I have nothing to do now, so I have my contractor with me and trying to do something. But anyway, I'm the owner of a mixed-use project on Ventura Boulevard. And we started the project about a year and a half ago. And on October 17th, 2014, we got the city planning approval. That's about 1 year ago. And then finally on October 5th this year, we have a meeting with the city engineers department and the fees meetings. So we have everything done. But in there is one a condition including a construction bond and a bank guarantee CD, bank guarantee CD for the city. And this particular, as a small developer, to buy a bond is almost impossible, too expensive. So we were asked to get a CD with the bank assigned to the city. But unfortunately, the bank have changed rules. The bank I deal with was Wells Fargo's. It took us over 2 weeks, still no result. And we're waiting for that piece of paper, and Ms. Lindy Moore was waiting for that to give us a final okay. And we're supposed to be put for this particular night to have it finalized because we're really anxious to get going. And because we did not get the CD in time, so we're going to be put back to the next meeting. So all my request is you don't impose this particular resolution additional fees on my small project. And I hope meet your consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Your Honor, is this something that should be given to our planning director, our planning, Mr. Joe here, to look into and talk with him about it?
Your Honor, I'll have a response for that. However, do you have any other speaker cards?
Yeah, there's a couple more.
Yeah, I'll hold my responses till after all the speakers.
Okay. You'll get a response, Hillary. Mr. Fox will make a response to your inquiry after we finish the speaker cards. Okay. Randy Bauer.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Randy Bauer. I'm with Symphony Pools, and we build swimming pools throughout the Ventura County and Camarillo. And I would like to thank you for hearing us out at your last council meeting and reconsidering and resolving the filling and refilling of swimming pools. We are mostly small family-run businesses, and this would have created considerable hardship on our businesses. Again, as we stated in our presentation, building a swimming pool and surrounding deck will actually, compared to an irrigated lawn, actually saves water. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
How's the pool business going?
Sorry?
How's the pool business?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Contrary to some people, we do get some good from time to time. Okay, Tony Trimley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am speaking before you tonight as a 32-year resident, and I'm not here in a professional capacity representing clients. I had the good fortune of sitting through the informational meeting at the city library and also at the last council meeting, and so I've had the opportunity to really look at this program in some level of depth. And as many of you may know, I spend probably 80% of my time on public water supply and regulatory issues. In a personal capacity, I want to thank the city staff for developing this program. I think it's creative. I very much want to stand in front of you and support it, and in fact, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. This is a good program, and I think you should. Pass it. I have three very specific recommendations for you, though, just very briefly. First of all, I think you should, and it's really three challenges, and this is said with high compliments. One is to make sure that you set some very specific criteria or benchmarks for your periodic review of the success of this program. And I know there are probably already some in already that Mr. Fox has designed and that staff has designed, but make sure that you focus on what those benchmarks are and for the criteria that you consider to make it successful. Number two, do it rigorously. Do this on a quarterly basis. Don't put it off for a year. Ask staff to come back to you within 90 days for the first benchmark session on how you're doing. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, let us as city residents know how this is going. Please communicate regularly on the success or on the downsides of some of this program. And then finally, on a totally unrelated note, keep moving forward on the desalter project. It's a good project. It's worthy of a long look. And again, I appreciate staff's efforts and the council's efforts in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Those good comments. All right. Any questions of the City Council? If not, staff have any responses?
Is there anybody else?
I guess I should ask, is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on this public hearing? If not, we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to staff and council.
Your Honor, normally I go through the order of the way the speakers came up with any comments and respond. I think instead I'm going to, because it's a very specific item that Dr. Ling brought up, I'll respond to that and then conclude with more of a general summary that I think will respond to the other comments. Dr. Ling does raise a good point, and that is that he has a project that was scheduled to be before you tonight. And the reason that's significant is that while usually with an ordinance, once that goes into effect, there's 30 days or 60 days, depending, before it becomes effective. In this case, because it's a water ordinance, the statute sets out that it goes into effect tonight. So the program would, after tonight, require any project coming in to obtain a water will serve letter to then pay this contribution, or else have some other solution if they have that available to them. In the case of Dr. Ling, he was scheduled to be on the agenda tonight because he has a small project for basically 4 apartment units that generates about 0.6 acre feet a year of demand, which would be about a little under $6,000 in contribution that would have to be made through this program. Due to some of the delays at the last minute that occurred, we were not able to get the item on the agenda tonight, but it will be on your next agenda next week. The council could direct that because of the last minute delays, you could grant relief from having to pay the contribution in his case and be allowed to move forward and get a water will serve letter if you do approve his item next week. Another item to take into consideration is because it was only 4 units, we generally only require a water impact study to be conducted for projects of 5 or more units, so there isn't a water impact study to go back and look at, you know, to see what the demand is, but we can estimate based off of our default values. Also, within the ordinance, there is a provision, and now that while it doesn't apply directly, it does give some, I think, sense of scale. There is a provision that we provided as an exception that if a project is temporary and not going to use more than an acre foot of water, then they would also be exempt from having to pay a contribution. In this case, if you look at Dr. Ling's project only generating about 0.6 of an acre foot of demand, knowing that it's going to be, if you know his project does go forward next week, at least a year before his project is completed and occupied, and then you add another, and you look at an acre foot of use, that's another 1.5 years before he's exceeded the acre foot of use. You're looking at 2.5 years before even 1 acre foot of water has been used on his property, so it's very minor. So if you were to grant an exception tonight, the impact to our water supply would be so negligible it wouldn't really have an impact. So you could take that into consideration. I just lay that out, but that would be a policy direction, and I would not suggest that we edit or modify the ordinance, but instead, if you were to consider that, you would make it as a part of your motion. And then the more general response, the first speaker that got up, basically, the simple answer is we share hers as well as everybody's desire to be as effective as we can in managing our water supply, and we are trying to go as far as we can in ensuring that. What we did not go into tonight, which you've had, and I don't know if I should call it the burden of hearing from me so many times, all our different programs that we have to manage our water supply. I think we've done a really good job of developing an overall program that fortunately we embarked on 10 years ago, and a lot of that's coming to fruition. So we are in a pretty good position compared to most water agencies, that we have some strategies in place that others don't. And I will maybe get specific on a couple points. One of the comments was to wait for the GMA, the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency manages groundwater in our area as well as the western half of Ventura County. We have been working closely with them to understand, as they put the groundwater management plan together, what their goals are. And not only is their goal to preserve the water volume in our aquifer or in our basin, but also water quality. And if you look at our desalter as one example, that not only are we, in essence, producing a new water source, because we're taking a very poor quality water that nobody can use, extract it, treat it, and now we've created a new water source, we're also preventing that brackish plume of water that is migrating and spreading out from contaminating other areas of the basin that have good quality water. So we are actually meeting one of the objectives of the Groundwater Management Agency, and that is to protect water quality, and we have to certainly take that into consideration with our overall strategy. We also have just recently, and this was part of the program we started 10 years ago, was to implement a recycled water program at our wastewater treatment plant. We now, in one of our peak days recently, served our entire supply of recycled water, 3.5 million gallons in one day, and that was served to current historic water customers that were using potable water that no longer have to use potable water. So that is a way that we've basically been able to reduce our demand on the aquifer and the potable water, groundwater supply that we have. Just to give you a sense of scale, we, several years ago, before the drought years, we're serving 10,000 acre feet a year to our service area. This year we're on target to serve just a little over 7,000. So that's an example of how we significantly reduced the impact on our the pumping of our from our groundwater basin. So I think these are just some examples of some of the important strategies that we have in place that are bringing about real results, and because of that, we feel very comfortable that we have a strong program in place to protect our water supply. And if you take action tonight, that's just one more strategy to help. And it's not to allow new development to further draw from the water demand that we have. It was actually intended to create an offset. So the goal is that whatever amount of new demand the development creates, it's going to go out and reduce the demand somewhere else to offset it, so there'll be a zero impact on our water supply. So again, with that in mind, I would reiterate the recommendation, and that is to approve the items before you tonight.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any questions of City Council?
Comment later.
I have a question. If you can clarify on the I'm going to call it the small projects, and I was thinking that anything under 5 this wouldn't apply to, but is that only the study, so that a 1 unit would still have to be part of this program?
Yes, going forward, as long as this program's in place, the intent is that, while you're right, that while they may not be required to prepare a water impact study, that would really only apply to residential, because any type of commercial or an industrial project at this point, we're going to require a water impact study. But for the small residential, while they don't have to prepare the study, they would still have to, if they don't have other options available to them, have to make the contribution for the number of units that they have.
And how do you calculate that?
Again, we have that per unit quantity. So if you use apartment as an example, that was estimated to be 0.15 acre feet a year.
You just take that average for one single residential unit.
Right,
And that's what they
and multiply it times the number of units.
Okay. Okay, Charlotte, do you have a comment?
I just have a comment since a couple of times Fox Canyon GMA was brought up. Having been on their board for, 12 of the last 14 years or something like that, I would say you could, it's estimated that things might be coming in May, but that doesn't mean they'll be here by next October. Traditionally, it's been one of the slowest agencies I've ever seen to move, and I've told them that too. So we have a lot on our plate. Getting the new groundwater management, the new groundwater management agency up and going is going to be taking a lot of time. We had a special meeting in August. We're going to have a special meeting on Friday the 13th. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of other special meetings, but with so much going on and having to develop goals and objectives and everything else, I'm not sure that they will be meeting all of the timeline targets that they're anticipating right now.
Just as long as they meet the timeline target for desalter, that's fine.
You bet.
Yeah.
That's all we're care about. Desalter.
All right. What's the pleasure of City Council?
Well, you want to request the reading of the title?
You need to request a title.
Okay. Have the title, please.
This is ordinance number 1116, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, amending Section 14.12.040 of Chapter 14.12, Water Conservation Measures, of the City of Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to the city's water conservation measures under its water shortage contingency plan.
I'll move to waive further reading and adopt ordinance amending Municipal Code 14-12, water conservation measures.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, please vote. That motion carries 5-0.
Your Honor, I move to adopt resolution redeclaring a Stage 2 water shortage condition and imposing additional conservation measures.
Second.
This doesn't mean we're going to go any further than we are right now. It's just reaffirming what we've got in place right now, just so you know.
Any discussion? If not, please. That motion passes 5-0.
Move to adopt a resolution establishing the Water Conservation Credit Program.
Second?
A second motion.
Oh, I thought you said second. I thought you said second.
I was looking for a second. Okay. Any further discussion? Not, please vote.
I did too.
Motion carries 5-0. So that.
I have a question for staff, and I guess a question for council. We talked about the exception that we would have to authorize you to give that exception, and I'm wondering if it could be worded in such a way that it affects, and I don't know if there's others out there, of those small developments that are at a current stage, that it would be fair to they also would be have an exception to it, rather than just naming one particular project.
Are there any?
Well, Your Honor, I don't know of any offhand that are small like this that are on the near-term horizon. What I can say is, in trying to define a clean line, Dr. Ling's project is the only project that has already been through a fee meeting and has completed all of the work, and they were just basically in the queue waiting to get on an agenda. All other projects going forward from this point are still either trying to wrap up plans or doing more work and are not ready to be agendized. So at least that's one clear line. The other is, and that would be direction for you to provide to us, if your sense is that you would like to exempt certain projects that are smaller in scale, one criteria you could use is, unless they're required to prepare a water impact study, they would not be required to contribute to this program. Because that would basically include all the projects that would have to contribute would be all of the commercial, industrial, and any residential of 5 or more units.
If that
makes some
does that need a motion,
Makes more sense.
Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah.
Does that need a motion or amendment, or what do we need?
Well, we've already made a motion to adopt the ordinance without that provision in it. We could return to you at a future meeting with that.
Dennis, don't leave. We can ask to reconsider as long as nobody has left the room.
I would.
First time we've ever asked you not to leave, huh?
I would suggest that if you want to do something for a class of people, we consider that as a separate action put forward on another agenda.
Well,
But this one, I think, is a matter of urgency because of the timing of the application, the approval of the project, and all the other things that Dr. Ling and Tom Fox mentioned. So I would suggest that if you want to bring something back, you ask to get on another agenda.
That's not the reason I did it, but I personally think that when you start to make exceptions for one singular one, that's not good public policy. But when you make an exception because of a circumstance, that's good public policy. So I was trying to find that circumstance that was in the motion rather than saying we're going to give an exception to Dr. Ling. That's what I was after.
Maybe we could just simply say that all other projects in a similar circumstance as Dr. Ling is exempted also.
Well, it's and if you say it's the fee schedule meeting and all that's left is final approval by the city council, then there's your criteria.
There is.
Do we need a motion for that?
Could I ask for like about a 2-minute, not recess, but give me 2 minutes. I want to consult with Mr. Davis, who was involved with the drafting of this ordinance. I know there are exceptions in Section 7, but if you just give me a minute to have that conversation.
Can we take a break for 5 minutes?
Well, you don't need to, you could take a break if you wish, but I do want to consult with him about this particular issue.
Now for an hour and a half. So.
5 minutes.
Okay, 5-minute recess would be fine.
Okay, well, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Sorry.
I'm going to call the council back into session.
Is your mic on?
Your mic's not on.
Turned it off. Okay. Council's back into session, and do we have a report from the attorney?
Yes, it's my recommendation, and it's concurred by Mr. Davis and Mr. Fox as well, is that we leave the action as you took it tonight in adopting the ordinance as it was presented to you. If your direction is to add an additional exception to the requirement for the contribution, that you do so. You can give us direction tonight that that is your desire, and we can bring this back to you at your meeting on November 14th. There isn't time for us to...
4th.
No,
No, 18th.
I misspoke. November 18th. There's not time to notice it to bring it back on November 4th, but we could, well, there's just not, you need at least 5 days' notice. This matter, the ordinance that's in front of you, there was a public hearing notice that indicated that this was the ordinance that was going to be considered by the council.
Are there exceptions in that ordinance we could use? That's what I thought you were looking for.
No, there's none that would apply to 4 units or less. So you would, if you want to make an exception for 4 units or less, we can do that. It's not complicated. They can come back to you on the 18th, and you could add that exception.
Is there an exception that would work for 1 unit that was in the process and within a time? Are there any exceptions in the ordinance?
Yes, but none of them would apply.
Say him.
You know, it was kind of like our fault a little bit in this thing.
It is
because
our
it got
fault.
put off. And that put it into that zone where it's, wait till the 18th.
It was our
that just-
fault.
Pardon me?
I don't think it was our fault.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I think to add a little more information that I think will help Dr. Ling understand how the project can keep moving, and that it sounds like it might be a good idea to consider small projects anyhow, and so that's the exemption we would propose to bring forward on the 18th, is that any project of 4 units, residential units or less, would not have to pay the contribution. And it may be just trying to manage that little amount of money is as much cost to manage it as it is to pay it. So that might be a reason to allow that exemption, just so small projects aren't burdened with more fees as well. If you do go that route, Dr. Ling's project can still come before you next week, because the item that would be on the agenda is to approve construction plans to allow him to proceed. What normally happens is, as he starts proceeding into construction, at some point we issue a water will serve letter. We would just hold off until after your November 18th meeting to issue the water will serve letter, and at that time there wouldn't be a requirement for a contribution.
You can go forward with
But
it.
his project would still be on the agenda for next week.
I have a question. did you say earlier that one of the options for if you're building a swimming pool is that they would have to contribute something?
Yes. But it was.
So how would that one swimming pool compare to the use of 4 units or less?
It could be comparable.
One swimming pool would equal the,
It would actually be, I think, less. I'd have to go back and look at the quantity of water that a swimming pool has.
That's a good point.
I mean, I think we have to be equitable here.
That's a good
My feeling is that once you open the door, you're going to have all kinds of people rushing in to get inside, and I just don't. I'm looking for a way to take care of an issue that the city, in a sense, created, or at least it was partially created, or at least.
Somebody has to explain it to me, because how did the city cause this?
Well, we didn't do anything. I'll start and just be real blunt. We didn't do anything wrong, so that's not. There wasn't anything done wrong to cause this. No. What happened is it was a circumstance that we only have council meetings only every so many weeks, and the timing of the project to be able to get on the agenda ran into a snag on their end because of some delays that were beyond their control. And
So not our fault.
Not our fault, but still because of those delays, and it was literally down to almost a day or two. If they had come in earlier, we could have got it on the agenda for tonight, and then it wouldn't be an issue. But we just weren't able to do that. So that's what we're looking at, is a project that was that close to making the agenda tonight, and by not making it, there's a new impact imposed on it when they have already gone through their the fee meeting is where we lay out all the costs and the fees for the city, and they pay it, and they get their securities, and they've completed all that, so they've met all of the requirements. It was just a matter of the fact that because there's only meetings every 2 weeks, that there wasn't, if this meeting was 2 days from now, we wouldn't have an issue.
So could we, he said there were no exceptions, but if there were an exception, then we could say the council has the authority to make the exception, that because of strictly a timing issue or whatever?
Yeah, my understanding is, and this would be a question for the attorney, though, that you do not have the authority to say this project does not have to contribute to the program if they're required under the current ordinance.
The exemptions are on page 17 of the packet.
I don't remember him saying those kind of things.
That's the red line version, because that's the only version I deal with.
Yeah, I agree.
There's nothing about this that can fit into one of those slots.
There's another option that I could throw out, and I'm sorry, I'm getting creative on the floor here, and that's dangerous.
Good boy.
I don't know how creative your option is, but I have one.
Okay.
So if you want to throw that one out. What we can do, in light of the timing of this, is you could make a motion to reconsider your approval of the ordinance as it's written and as it was noticed for tonight, and rescind that approval. We could then, you can give us direction tonight to revise the ordinance, add the exception, if that's your direction, to 4 units or less, and then we just continue this public hearing to November 4th, and then you can adopt it on November 4th with that exception.
Your Honor, I will move to rescind
Your Honor, that's one option. The other thing you consider is just rescinding your action and not taking any action tonight, and we bring it back with no change on the 4th. And Dr. Ling's item will be on that agenda that night as well, and it'll be approved before this item, so therefore it would be approved before the deadline. And then you don't have to make any exceptions unless you want to. If you feel there's a need for an exception, we can certainly entertain that as well.
I'm not interested in making any exceptions other than this situation that was caused by a timing problem.
I like Tom's.
I will move to rescind our action on adopting the ordinance.
Second. This with the understanding this will be brought back next meeting.
Your Honor,
I need to interject here. I don't want to be too technical, but what we really first need is a motion to reconsider the action that you took. So the
I'm
first action is
sorry.
a motion to reconsider your action on the ordinance, and if that passes, then the motion would be to rescind.
I'll move to reconsider the previous action on this ordinance.
Second.
And then you need to vote.
Let me ask you a question. Is this going to take a notification of another public hearing and all the other?
No, we can tonight, you have not, I don't believe you closed the public hearing, did we?
You did.
Okay. Yes. So the motion would be broader than just the.
Well, we did it in 3 motions. Do we have to do the?
No, you don't need. No. You can do one motion to reconsider all the approvals.
I'll withdraw my motion.
All right. Let's reopen the public hearing. The first things first. Let's reopen the public hearing. Okay. Now.
We'll reopen the public hearing.
All right. Now to be a motion to reconsider the approvals that the council made tonight on this item.
I'll move to reconsider the 3 approvals for this item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion carries 4-1.
Then the next action would be a motion to, if this is your wish, motion to rescind the approvals, the ordinance and the resolutions adopted tonight.
So move.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
And the last motion would be a motion to.
Carries 4-1.
Excuse me. The last motion would be a motion to continue the public hearing to November 4th.
So moved.
Second.
On the criteria, we don't have to listen to the whole presentation.
Your Honor, she read my mind. I was going to say, unless directed otherwise, I was not planning to subject you to another one of my presentations.
At least the shorter version, yeah.
Okay, please vote. That motion carries 5-0.
We're trying to be fair, everyone, to make sure people don't get run over.
It
So
seems like we could do something other than
I know.
to solve the problem, other than to go back through the whole thing again.
legally, you have to, Bill.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
I'll trust the attorney's opinion.
Okay.
That's why we got them. I mean, we didn't have 2 in the house tonight.
All right.
Did have 3.
We go back to where we were.
That was easy.
Item B.
Go to item B, ordinance amending Chapter 16.04 of the Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to the water conservation fixtures and fittings.
Thank you, Mayor
Yes,
Little.
Renee.
My name is Renee Mario. I'm the building official. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. The city has initiated an ordinance to add sections 16.04.256 and 16.04.257 to Title 16 of the Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to water-conserving fixtures and fittings based upon climatic conditions. For residential construction, the ordinance requires installation of dual-flush toilets, sensor-operated self-closing bathroom faucets, and an on-demand recirculating system. For non-residential construction, the ordinance requires metered sensored operating self-closing faucets, point-of-use hot water heaters for all fixtures, all bathroom fixtures requiring hot water, and 0.125 gallon per flush urinals. We estimate that this will save approximately 20,000 gallons per household annually and about 80,000 gallons per year for a business of approximately 100 employees. The ordinance will take effect immediately and will apply to all permit applications submitted after tonight. We're requesting a reading of title and a motion to waive further reading, adopt the ordinance 1115, amending Chapter 16.04 of the Camarillo Municipal Code to add sections pertaining to water-conserving fixtures and fittings based upon local climatic, topographic, and geological conditions.
A question. I have several questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said permits requested after tonight. So this involves not just new construction, but replacements. Is that what you said last week?
Correct.
And so if I wanted to replace a faucet in my bathroom, that's not something you need a permit for. So do I need this type of?
Actually, you do need a permit to replace a faucet.
You do need a permit to replace a faucet. Okay.
Yes.
So for any kind of a replacement, how are we going to notify people of this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess we can put it out in the city scene.
It goes out in city scene, but that isn't right away.
Well,
I mean, I think we have an obligation to tell people, and
seemed like to me that we could send out a letter to all the plumbing contractors and those people who are involved in the business to inform them that this is a change. And
well, there are a lot of homeowners who do their own work.
I'm sure of that. I don't know, other than through the city scene and our normal standards.
How about a utility billing insert?
Utility billings.
Oh, that would be good.
But you're going to get more faster action if you go by to the building trades and let them know this.
But wouldn't, if you go in for a permit, they're going to tell you. I mean, that's when you're going to learn about it, is when you go in for your permit. And the people who don't get permits aren't going to care anyway, so, right?
Oh, you're right.
So you're informed when you go to get your permit.
I was going to go someplace else with that. I think these are all good suggestions. I still think we need to do more than just contact the plumbing trades. I think we do need to have something in the city scene. I don't think it would hurt to have a utility billing insert. I can remember back in the early 90s when we dealt with things like this, we asked the plumbing stores to put a little thing up and say if you were within the city of Camarillo service area, this applies. And a lot of people read it, but then all of the people who helped at Home Depot and at Camarillo Plumbing and Paint knew that.
Good point.
How much
Can that be done, Renee?
Yes.
Okay.
How much is a permit to do that?
Ask her.
Renee?
How much what?
How much is a permit to do that? Like a faucet?
If you were to change a faucet, it's probably $53.80, I think, is the total, somewhere around there, $54. It's our minimum permit fee.
Okay.
More than the faucet.
Please, any other comments? No. Any questions of Renee? Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to be heard on this matter? Yes, Mr. Lormore, you haven't heard today.
I think it's good to have low faucets and toilets and all that, but this is a first. I'd like to know how many other cities, did I hear that correctly? $53 for a permit to change your faucet?
That's what you heard.
I'd like to know how many cities are doing that. That seems to be pretty high to change. You're going to have people pay $53 to come in to change, to pay for a faucet that costs like $29?
I don't think you can buy a faucet for $29.
You can. You can. I'm just saying, I haven't heard of a city. I'd like to, before you're going to move on to that, I'd really like to know how many cities are charging that. I'm not aware of, I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of cities that charge permits, change faucets. Toilets, yes. I know when you're doing general construction, stuff like that, but I mean, I've never heard of a city charging $53 for a permit to change a faucet. I mean, I'm going to look into that, but I just think that's kind of extreme to charge that kind of money for, do you really think homeowners are going to come into the city and pay $53 to change their faucet? I just think, there's a better way of doing it, lowering the fee. I can see toilets, that makes sense, but I mean, faucets, that's a new one on me. Is there any other fee? If you change it, what about your...
Matt, we're not in the business of talking about the building code and fees. If you have anything to add to what we're talking about with the changes in the code regarding water conservation.
Well, I understand that, Bill, but you have to take that in consideration too, Bill. How many people, I'd like to know how many cities are charging $53 to replace a faucet. You're going to pass an ordinance here tonight, and I just think that's kind of a little high.
as a
That's
user
not
fee.
part of this ordinance.
I know, I know.
Not at all.
Not part of it at all.
None.
All it does is change the kind of faucet you can have.
And we did have a long, you read it too, we had a long fee
Well, I
thing,
know
and
your
it talked
user
about it in
fees
there.
are way too
And
high.
so other cities are also doing the same thing.
Well,
I'm sorry.
53, well, I'm going to check that out.
Please
But thank
do.
you. I will.
Give me
Mike,
something
thank
to
you.
do.
Have a nice evening.
All, okay, yeah, okay. If one else wishes to be heard on this matter.
I just wanted to comment on
Please.
Name.
Jameson Lingle.
Okay, you
I just
need
wanted
to
to
fill out a card and give it to the city
All right.
clerk afterwards.
Absolutely. In 2002, when I was a senior in high school, I interned for the city manager's office here in Camarillo. I think it was before you took over, so I didn't work much with you. But one thing I would have loved to have done when I was an intern for the city would have been helping with social media in terms of engaging and communicating with people that live in the city. I've been doing that for a while now, and I'd like to recommend, if you're looking for ways to communicate with residents that live in the city, for the city to, I don't know if you guys have any interns, but to find ways to use social media to get information out there.
Good idea.
Okay,
You're right,
thank
we're
you.
falling behind.
Got to get our website up, too.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the city council. Staff, any other comments of staff or comments of the council? We've talked about this on several occasions, so
Yes, we have.
is there a motion?
You got to request
Rest
the
of
reading of the title.
Okay.
Did you make a motion, Charlotte?
No, he's got to request reading the title.
Yeah, you got to read the title.
All right. I will read the title. This is ordinance number 1115, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, amending Chapter 16.04 Uniform Building Codes adopted by reference of Title 16 Buildings and Construction of the Camarillo Municipal Code to add sections 16.04.256 and 16.04.257 pertaining to water conservation fixtures and fittings based upon local climatic, topographic, and geographical conditions.
Okay.
I'll move to waive further reading of the ordinance and adopt ordinance number 1115, amending Chapter 16.04 of the Camarillo Municipal Code, and to add sections pertaining to water conservation fixtures and fittings based upon local climatic, topographical, and geographical conditions.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Please vote. That motion carries. Okay, we go to item C, which is an ordinance amendment to the Camarillo Municipal Code, Chapter 14.14, pertaining to water-efficient landscapes and resolution amending city's landscape and irrigation guidelines.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Mrs. Lee, our senior planner, will be presenting this item.
You speak into that microphone, Dave? Or Dave, Joe?
They're all named.
We can't hear you, in other words.
Thank you. Mrs. Lee, our senior planner, will be presenting this item.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Little, council members. Tonight I'll be discussing the various tools that the city has to regulate the design of landscapes and ensure that the landscaping is water efficient. So first I want to start by familiarizing you with the code sections and guidelines that the city uses to regulate landscape projects. First, we have Chapter 14.14 of the Camarillo Municipal Code. This chapter was adopted by the City Council in 2009, and it establishes water-efficient landscape regulations in compliance with AB 1881, which required the city to adopt an ordinance that was at least as effective in conserving water as the State Model Water-Efficient Landscape Ordinance. I will refer to it as the Model Ordinance for short. The Model Ordinance mainly applies to new development and to rehabilitated landscapes for commercial developments. And then next we have, related to Chapter 14.14, are the guidelines for the implementation of the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, which provides for the more technical requirements for projects that are subject to Chapter 14.14. And then finally, we have the city's landscape and irrigation guidelines. Section 19.38.060 of the Municipal Code permits the City Council to establish these guidelines for the regulation of landscaping and irrigation within the city. And these guidelines outline the city's procedural requirements, plan check process, and provide a list of suggested plant materials. It also contains provisions for the use of artificial turf and drought-tolerant landscapes in lieu of grass lawns. So tonight, the following actions that will be considered are amend and restate Camarillo Municipal Code Chapter 14.14 to adopt the updated state model ordinance by reference, to rescind the current guidelines for implementation of the City of Camarillo Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance because these would be replaced with the new updated state model ordinance. And then finally, to amend the City of Camarillo Landscape and Irrigation Guidelines to be consistent with the updated state model ordinance. And in working in consultation with our city attorney, it is proposed that the city adopt the state model ordinance by reference, which streamlines our procedures and review process. It also becomes more user-friendly for customers to understand both the city and state landscape requirements. And just to give you some background as to what is triggering these changes, on April 1st of this year, Governor Brown issued Executive Order B 2915, directing the Department of Water Resources to update the state model ordinance in an effort to further conserve water used for outdoor landscaping. The updated model ordinance promotes efficient landscapes in new developments and retrofitted landscapes by increasing water efficiency standards through more efficient irrigation systems and limiting the portion of landscapes that can be covered in grass lawn. It also requires the city to submit an annual report to the Department of Water Resources on the implementation of the model ordinance. The state gave local agencies until December 1st, 2015 to adopt the updated model ordinance or to adopt their own ordinance, which must be at least as effective in conserving water as the state model ordinance. The city is proposing to adopt the updated state model ordinance by reference. And by updating adopting by reference would simplify the process as the updated model ordinance is over 25 pages long. Also, if the state updates the model again, the city would not have to amend our code. And to point out some of the key changes to the updated state model ordinance, it includes that the updated model ordinance would apply to all new landscaping equal to or greater than 500 square feet. And currently, the threshold is 2,500 square feet for commercial development and 5,000 square feet for homeowner-installed landscaping. Grass lawn is also prohibited in areas including parkways less than 10 feet wide unless on-street parking is permitted and must be irrigated by subsurface irrigation or other means that produces no overspray or runoff. Currently, the threshold prohibits grass lawn in areas of 8 feet in width. The update would effectively limit new grass lawns to 25% in residential projects and to 0% in non-residential projects, unless it is irrigated with recycled water or used for recreation. And also, it requires the city to submit an annual report to the Department of Water Resources that includes the total square footage subject to the model ordinance and the number of landscape retrofits during the reporting period. The prior ordinance did not include this requirement. And the city is also initiating an amendment to the city's landscape and irrigation guidelines to ensure that the guidelines are consistent with the updated model ordinance. And this includes expanding the provisions for drought-tolerant landscaping on single-family residential properties and parkways. And to provide you with some history, back in July of this year, the City Council authorized interim revisions to the guidelines that reduced the amount of live plants required for front yard landscape conversions to drought-tolerant landscaping or artificial turf. And the interim revisions were Up to 90% of the front yard landscaping may be artificial turf, with the remaining 10% to be live plants. And previously, the ratio was 50-50. And however, though, at the October 6th Planning Commission meeting, the Commission expressed some concerns about increasing the amount of artificial turf permitted within the front yard landscape area to 90%. The Commission felt that 90% was a bit excessive and made a recommendation to the City Council that up to 70% of the front yard landscape area may be artificial turf, and the remaining 30% must be live plants. The other interim revision that the council authorized in July was that up to 70% of the front yard may consist of non-live plant materials such as rock, gravel, and wood chips. The remaining 30% must be live plants. And previously, the ratio was 40% non-live plants to 60% live plants. And then lastly, the other interim change that the council authorized was to allow for decorative rocks, wood chips, and decomposed granite in the parkway, but it must include plants every 10 feet. And again, when the Planning Commission met, they were concerned about permitting wood chips within the parkway, as they felt that the wood chips in particular would become a maintenance issue and difficult to prevent from keeping off the street and the sidewalk. Therefore, the Commission recommended that wood chips not be included as a permitted material within the parkway. And with that, with respect to CEQA, the proposed ordinance amendment and the amendments to the city's landscape and irrigation guidelines are not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, because the activity is covered by the general rule that CEQA applies to only projects which would have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. And to conclude, on October 6th, the Planning Commission made the following recommendations to the City Council. Amend and restate Camarillo Municipal Code, Chapter 14.14, which adopts the state model ordinance by reference, and rescind the guidelines for implementation of the City of Camarillo Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, and to approve the proposed amendments as modified by the Planning Commission to the City of Camarillo Landscape and Irrigation Guidelines. And that concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead, Charlotte.
My first question is on the how it's proposed that we adopt the ordinance and future amendments to the state code to then be automatically or the however you say it would automatically be amended in our code. How do we notify people of the changes?
Well, let me answer that. First of all, we're streamlining our ordinance, so we're adopting the model efficiency ordinance of the state by reference. And what that means is that if in the future there are changes in the state model water efficiency landscape ordinance that don't impact us whatsoever, we don't necessarily need to do anything. So if they change evapotranspiration rates in Northern California and it has zero impact on our community here in Camarillo, we're good. If in the future there are changes to the state model ordinance and we feel that it's imperative that we address ours, we would go through the same process and update our ordinance. So we would potentially bring it back for an update like we did this evening. It was first adopted in 2010 as a requirement of the state under Assembly Bill 1881. And because the changes are impacting all of the communities within the state, we brought it back to you this evening. So,
Okay, now that's not the way I read the recommendation.
We have the ability to not do anything under the reference. But if there are changes that affect Camarillo, we could bring back a new ordinance with those updates.
Okay.
I just also wanted to mention that projects that are typically subject to the state model ordinance are not going to be your typical homeowner projects where they maybe replace their lawn. It applies to projects that are where you have a development, like a new tract of homes, or you have a new apartment project, or you have a new commercial development. But it's not going to apply to, say, somebody that wants to re-landscape their front yard.
Okay. Okay. I want to get, I've got several things, so I'm just going to go through, Your Honor, and read my notes, if that's okay.
Sure.
On the Planning Commission's recommendation to go back, or to go up to 70%, I kind of think this is like a swinging pendulum, because was it July we talked about this?
Correct.
Yeah, in July. We went up to 90%. We had a very small percentage that could be artificial turf. And then we said, hey, wait a minute, and we told all the people, you know, you can go up to 90%. So people are planning on the 90%. I think now, if we go back to 70%, we're really going to look foolish. I think we need to stay at what we told people. It was in city scene, and we did that as an interim measure, and I personally think we need to stay there. I do not have a problem with removing the ability to put wood chips in the medians, by the way. I think that was a good suggestion. And let me get up here to the other things. In the guidelines. Oh, we're adopting an ordinance, and I'm on big page 31 or page 11 of the ordinance. And it says water features. Let's see, this is landscape design and plan. And then it talks about pool and spa covers are highly recommended. We had people come at our last meeting about the other ordinance and say, you know, you really ought to promote pool and spa covers. Right now we're starting into the winter season. This has really nothing to do with this, but it does say in the ordinance, pool and spa covers are highly recommended. I'm thinking that we need to have some kind of a thing going out to people saying, we're really recommending that you do this. It's going to conserve a lot of water because of the evaporation. It's in our ordinance. We're not requiring it, but we're recommending it, and it will also help you because it'll help you save water. And a lot of people don't have those. So that was my...
It's a whole different.
Pardon?
That's under the water conservation versus this.
It's right here in this.
It's not part, I mean, what you're saying about notifying people doesn't have anything to do with the ordinance. You're not proposing that we require it, I guess it's...
It isn't proposed that we require it in the ordinance. It's stated in the ordinance.
That we recommend.
That we recommend they do it, and I'm saying we ought to let people know that we're recommending it.
That's important.
Some
cities require it.
I don't know of
Okay.
anybody that requires it.
Back here on big page 43, little page 23, there is a worksheet. It's called a Water Efficient Landscape Worksheet. And I'm not questioning the worksheet or going through developing those, but are we going to hold a meeting with the landscape contractors to ahead of time and say, these are the new rules?
Yes, we've already been implementing these.
Okay. Well, we've been implementing them, and so one-on-one maybe, but are we going to let them know generally? I mean,
Yes, the industry knows about this, and we've
Okay.
been updating each project that has approved landscaping plans has been coming through for an updated plan check with our landscape architect consultant, and the industry is aware of these requirements.
Okay. Someplace else, and I can't find it right now, but in the ordinance, I'm pretty sure, I'm now on big page 55, and the stamp covers up, the little page, so I can't tell you what little page it is, but it just says Parkway Landscaping. And buried under number 1 in the last line, it says sod, but someplace else it says you can't put sod in unless it's
Unless it exceeds.
it's 10 feet wide. So I think that needs to be added to this.
That's a good point. Or we can strike that, because I don't know that, generally, we don't have parkways greater than 10 feet. So,
Well, I'm just pointing out that it seems to be an inconsistency. People read something in the law and they don't go to look to see if there's a different part of the ordinance that says something different.
okay.
Anything else, Charlotte?
I'm looking.
Anyone else have anything while Charlotte's looking?
Okay.
Well, I have a comment on the Planning Commission's recommendation. I happen to agree with both of theirs. I think we were a little aggressive when we went to that 90% artificial in the first place. I would agree with them. I personally am really worried about what it's going to look like 5 years from now when the artificial turf isn't as nice looking. So that's my personal opinion. I don't know if there was reasons why they said 70 versus 90.
Well, I think it's aesthetic, probably. But let me ask you, is these written in such a way that we would have to amend to go back to 90, or is it written so that if we don't do nothing, it'll go to 70?
It's drafted at 70-30, and some of the reasons that the Planning Commission included was, one, that turf is significantly hotter and warmer than natural grass.
And it is, yeah.
Can I tell you something real quick? I've got turf. I can walk out in my bare feet when it's hot and didn't get any kind of burn or anything.
You've got tough feet because I
judging,
can't do that.
Who's judging this kind of thing? Have they gone out and really checked it themselves?
There is some data that demonstrates that.
You must have tough feet, Charlie.
No, I don't. I got some good stuff, too.
So I just want to reiterate, that were some of the
What else?
raised. One thing from a staff perspective is that we've been trying to strike a balance here as well to respond to implementation of the guidelines with our customers and our residents. And one positive of having 70-30 is that it sets a standard that's consistent for both the southwestern landscape and artificial turf. And we also do take a liberal review approach that's a little bit more generous than maybe some of our strict building setback requirements. And so, for example, if a front yard has 70% of its yard area for artificial turf and some large trees, and those trees generate a shade coverage that would accommodate the 30%, we're getting there. So it may, in measurements, be an 80% artificial turf, but we look at things through the perspective of we want to make sure our citizens and residents are treated fairly and equitably, and having one standard of 70-30 is more consistent and probably easier to implement.
Is there a state law on this, or is this just on the percentage?
No, this
That's
is our
not in the
local.
law.
This is our local design guideline criteria.
And in state law, there isn't one.
Correct.
Let me ask you, Joe, I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a few individuals that came to a council meeting a number of months ago. Would they be in compliance with the 70%?
Yeah.
Their projects are completed.
They were completed, but would they be in compliance? Because that was the issue back then.
Yeah, they may be
They were not.
90%.
I don't recall.
But you wouldn't make them tear it up.
No, we're not going to make anyone tear it.
Grandfather them in. Okay, I got you.
So
Well, what
anybody new would have the 70.
What about somebody who's submitted their plans?
They would fall
They're going to be
under the
caught in the middle.
criteria. We would treat people fairly. I'd make sure of that.
So it's anybody going forward.
Well, is there any interest in amending the draft, which is now 70%, with no wood chips in between the parkways?
Amending?
Well,
Is that what you ask,
we have to
amending?
amend it
Yes.
to
No,
go
I don't
back
want to
to
amend it.
90%, or to allow wood chips in parkways.
Could you deal with the two issues separately and just ask for interest
All right.
in one and the
Okay,
other?
well, is there any interest in making them to consider that when we get into the, right now, we haven't even gotten into public hearings yet, but when we do, is there any interest in that?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take it up then. All right, is there anything else staff has to provide? Okay, thank you. We're going to open up the public hearing, and is there anyone that wishes to be heard? And stay to the subject, Matt. When you're in talking about an ordinance, you stay to the subject of it, not wander away from it, okay?
Well, Bill, I try to say what I feel I need to say. So that's what we call democracy. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not a staff member, but thank you. Here we go again. You know, we make policy and then we go back on it. I have to agree with Charlotte. You said 90%. Now we're talking 73%. I mean, really. I mean, you said 90%. If you didn't want 90%, you should have never went to 90%. So now we're going to flip-flop. And that's a big problem with the city. You know, before we said we couldn't build houses. Remember that? July 22nd? We said, oh, we can't serve Wilsall letters. That was Tom Fox. And then we came back and then we said, well, we can build them. So, I mean, there's a lot of inconsistency here. But you know something? You made a policy. You said 90%. That was the policy. You walked away. Everybody shook their hands, said, okay, that's it. And now we're back again. Now we're going to turn back. I don't think that's fair because you're setting up, hey, if you got 90%, congratulations, your grandfather then. You're really lucky. If you're new and you decide that you want to save a little more water, you can't do that. So, I mean, I just think it's inconsistency with policies that cause the city problems all the time. And this is another one. You said 90%, you should stick to your guns. That's what it was. And so that's my opinion as a resident. Thank you.
See, Matt, the reason is there's democracy within City Hall because the Planning Commission said one thing, the City Council said another, and now we're talking about who wins.
That's democracy. That's democracy.
This is the democratic
Thank you.
process.
Democratic process.
Plus, we amend and change ordinances all the time. That's what we're here for.
All the time. For the betterment of the community.
Okay, anyone else wish to be heard? If not, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council and staff. Any other questions? What is the pleasure of the
Your Honor, I would like to have a discussion before we get a motion. And I know we're talking about the guidelines, but sometimes when we start our motions, we do 1, 2, 3. And so I would like to talk about the wood chips in the, since these are 2 proposed changes from what we had decided earlier, to talk about the wood chips in the median, I mean, not in the medians, but in the parkways, and to talk about the 70%, 30%, or the 90%, 10% of the amount of artificial turf allowed in the front yard landscaping.
Okay, do you want to make a motion to, right now it's written that it's going to be 70% maximum. Now, all this is maximum. You can have as little as 10%, I guess.
Or none.
Or none. But maximum is under the council's back in July was 90% of your yard can be turf. Under this proposal, if we stick with the Plan Commission, it's 70% max. Sure. So, and on ours, we allowed wood chips in the parkways. Under them, they proposed not to. So, do you want to make a motion to make a change back to 90?
Can we discuss it a little
Let's
before we make a
discuss
motion?
it without a motion.
I agree with her on the wood chips. I like the wood chips idea, but we've got to set some standard that's got to be below the sidewalk. Because if you have them up on top, it's going to go away. I can tell you that right now because I have a lot of wood chips. When it rains heavy, if you don't have them down, it's going away.
Well, I think that they're going to create a problem. I think that they move around and people are going to walk over into them, and they could be a source of somebody getting injured. And I just think that it's a mess.
Yeah, I do too, because I think that there's people that, a lot of people are walkers now in the city using, our sidewalks. And I think for them, it's difficult to maintain those chips.
No, I agree with the Planning Commission.
I mean, if it's rocks or if it's if it's chips, if the rocks in there, same kind of thing.
That's even worse.
It's even worse.
Yeah, it's even worse, but that's in there. But wood chips are softer, but you got to keep them not above, but keep them
A
below.
lot of maintenance to them, though.
I understand that, but I'm saying it's a less expensive.
Well, I think we all agree on, you want wood chips in there?
If it's lowered, not at the level.
Well, we can't sit here and decide how we're going to construct it.
Our
That's the
staff
planning
can, though,
commission,
when they
or the
check it out,
planning department.
make sure it's below the surface.
Well,
I think just not have them.
Motion to,
Just a second. Kevin just brought up a point about people walking and the wood chips causing a problem. Gravel will cause you a bigger problem than wood chips if safety is your issue.
Exactly.
but that's a different issue.
Well, we can say no gravel.
Well, could we all figure out if we're going to have wood chips or not, and then talk about gravel?
Would someone like to make a motion or not?
No, I don't think we're ready for a motion. I think we can kind of discuss, and then we can make one motion that either has stuff or doesn't have it.
Well, I like wood chips as long as we give staff the direction that it's below the surface, it's below the level where it doesn't just go off.
I recall we talked about that back in July.
On stamp page 56, we did provide a standard that decorative gravel or decomposed granite is allowed as long as the surface is flush with the sidewalk.
Exactly.
Okay. Does that apply to the wood chips?
Same thing, huh?
We didn't include wood chips because we were following through with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, but it originally would have also addressed wood chips.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add a wood chip comment. From a different perspective, we've got a stormwater pollution prevention program, and wood chips going into the storm drain is probably not a good thing.
Good point.
Not a good idea.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because neither is gravel.
Gravel's a...
It isn't going to wash away like wood chips.
A little gravel will.
Well, you can't have pea gravel.
Wood chips will float. Sorry, I have them in my lawn. I know when it happens, it rains heavy.
I'll
So
make
is
a
it agreed?
motion well, I don't have to.
No, it's not in there, so we agree on
Leave
that.
that one alone.
Now, I'd like to discuss the 30, 70, the 70, 30, 90, 10 percentages for the artificial sod. I personally favor allowing people to have the larger amount of artificial sod.
I'm in favor of that as well.
You want to make a motion now?
I don't care.
I
think we can encourage them to have, staff can encourage them. Since I read this on our PowerPoint saying, we have these things we can do for you, encourage you, tell you how to improve your landscape, give them, in other words, give them a little advice. That's where the advice could come in right there about lowering that stuff.
What?
Advice on the landscaping. There's, on the PowerPoint presentation, it shows these addresses and stuff that the city will help you look at your landscaping and give you some ideas.
Okay,
Come in for
so
a bigger lawn, they may
which
give them some ideas about better landscaping. too.
which percentage do you favor?
He said he didn't care.
I don't care. As long as staff can be able to talk to them about the landscape.
I'll make a motion that we accept the 90-10 as submitted.
I'll
As
second.
submitted?
No, it's not as submitted. It was 30-70 as submitted.
The 90-10, the original.
Yeah, as we did in July. I'll second that.
Discussion?
I disagree. And of course, I didn't like it then, but I think that 90% of your front yard in artificial turf is a heck of a lot. And I like what staff said about being consistent, that you're consistent, that 70-30 ratio is the same, whether it be artificial turf or dirt and rocks and gravel or whatever you have, now you're consistent. That's what I,
Okay.
Your Honor,
besides all
before we
the other
vote-
reasons that
Before we vote,
planning.
I've had a chance to walk around our neighborhood and saw 3 of those that have been put in. Nobody puts in 90%. They put in plant mixed into on the sides and top and
Well,
the front.
this will allow people
Oh, I know
to
that, Bill,
put
but
it
I'm
in.
saying, most of them won't do it. They won't go that far. They're going to keep.
Well, but
some.
they might go over 70.
I haven't seen one.
I'm just saying to you that it's not going to be all 90% everywhere.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Please vote. Motion passes 3-2.
Okay, you ready to request reading the title?
I think we are. Is there anything else that we want to talk about on this one? Not, then we'll ask a request reading of title.
Yeah, that's ordinance number 1117, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo amending and restating Chapter 14.14 of the Camarillo Municipal Code relating to water-efficient landscapes.
Okay.
I'll move to waive further reading, introduce an ordinance amending and restating Chapter 14.14 of the
Second.
Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to the water-efficient landscape, and schedule the public hearing for November 4th, 2015, at 7:30 p.m. for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If
Mr.
not,
Mayor, is it necessary to recognize the amendment for 90% since it is written for 70?
I thought that was in the guidelines, not in the
That's
ordinance.
correct.
That's in the guidelines? Okay, thank
Which are
you.
adopted by resolution.
You have to clear mine. Sorry.
Yeah.
Please vote.
Wait a minute, excuse me, can you?
Just tell them it's different color.
She voted wrong.
Well, I voted until Mr. Norman clarified it.
Okay, so we're clearing, starting.
Okay, do it again. So this
Okay.
is just the ordinance, not.
This is the whole ordinance, yeah.
Thank you.
Bingo.
Motion carries 5-0.
Your Honor, I will move to adopt a resolution approving amendments to the City of Camarillo landscape and irrigation guidelines as submitted, with the one exception that the percentages be changed to allow 90% of artificial sod in the front yard.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there a discussion?
Trying to move things along here.
Me too.
All those, please vote.
We still got to go back there.
Motion carries 4-1. All right, I'll move down to item D on the public hearings. An ordinance amending the municipal code 1904, 1916 of chapter 19 pertaining to single-room occupancy SRO facilities. Yes. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor Little. So I'm going to provide a brief recap on where we've been and how this came to be. So first, in January of 2015, the city adopted the most current housing element, and that included Program 12, which was an implementation program requiring that the city amend its zoning code to comply with state law provisions pertaining to single-room occupancy facilities. Then we had a study session with the Planning Commission and City Council in March of this year to begin work on completing Program 12. And we introduced the topic of single-room occupancy facilities and formulated some direction that we received from the Council and Planning Commission. And we presented a draft ordinance to the Planning Commission on June 2nd, and they recommended approval of the ordinance to the City Council, which was first considered on July 8th, and the City Council voted 3-2 to recommend that we update the square footage criteria for the single-room occupancy facilities, and we completed that direction. And then we brought it back on August 26th, and the council further directed staff to consider proceeding with a single-room occupancy facility with an inclusionary requirement that it be part of a multifamily project. And so we've completed that direction. And so we're here tonight, and I'll give a brief overview. We're including a single-room occupancy facility as a facility with 6 or more dwelling units, where each unit would be a minimum of 300 square feet up to a maximum of 450 square feet. And the dwelling units would be required to have a kitchen and bathroom facilities. And these facilities would be only allowed in our RPD 30 zone with a conditional use permit application. And the single-room occupancy facilities now would have a development standard that they must be part of a multifamily residential project, and the units must be dispersed throughout the project with the total number of the single-room occupancy units not exceeding 50% of the total number of the residential units in the overall project. So that's a brief synopsis. I'm available for any questions. The suggested action is that you request a reading of the title and then make a motion to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
Okay, is there any questions of city?
I have just one.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe, with these proposed changes in front of us, do you feel as a planner that these are going to be a popular alternative?
I think for a community like Camarillo, there's not a strong propensity for this type of development, coupled with the fact that land values are higher than some other communities. Typically, developers want to have the highest and best use of their property, and so they would probably want to have larger facilities than a single-room occupancy facility would accommodate.
Okay.
Follow up on that, excuse me.
Yeah.
If you build one that's 800 versus 450, you got to build 2 kitchens. You got to build, the builders won't be tending to go for the smaller units. I guarantee you. You don't make as much money.
Okay.
Did that.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
With this, take the scenario of the fact that Camarillo now has a university here, and we will be housing students. So you build these units, and they kind of serve the purpose of a dorm in some respect, and you maybe get 2 people in that, versus having a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 people in it. Or wouldn't that, because of the university, wouldn't they see a scenario where this could become
Well, yes, this absolutely could be utilized for student housing or veteran housing, and it is a good resource. And the development standards that we included would make this type of housing comparable with some of our smaller apartments in town.
Mm-hmm.
I did some research, some boots on the ground analysis, and so, for example, we have Via Camarillo on Lantana, which has a 1-bedroom apartment for rent right now. It's 504 square feet, and the monthly rent is $1,400.
Jeez.
And then
Yep.
also we have Rosewood Apartments
What they're doing.
on Rosewood that has a studio apartment. That's 486 square feet, and the rent that they're advertising is $1,450 a month.
1,000 how much?
$1,450.
Yeah.
Is this on the beach?
This is right here in town.
It's on the Rosewood Beach.
You know, let me give you another example while we're sitting here doing this. 1968, 1-bedroom, got to be at least 400 to 500 square feet, $900 a month. So it's only $500 difference. And that was a little apartment thing that I lived in with my buddy going to school in the beginning.
Is there any other questions? I just got a question just so I know the math. It says these facilities shall be a minimum of 6 or more dwelling units to qualify. And no more than 50% can be of that variety. So you would have to have a minimum of apartment, a building of 12, minimum of 12 units to count as a SRO building, but yet
With
stay
market
within the
rate.
50%.
That's correct.
Okay. Is that, would that be permitted in the zoning that we have?
It would be permitted in an RPD 30 zone, yes.
Okay.
I think some single seniors would be.
All right, let's open the public hearing. Is there anyone to be heard on this?
Where'd he go?
I mean, we've lost our audience, except for Jameson. You have anything you want to say now? Okay.
Social media talk doesn't count right now.
James, you're a strong soul, son, sitting out here still.
Hearing here, okay, motion,
Requested reading of the title.
please read the title.
Yeah, this is Ordinance 1111, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, amending Chapters 19.04 and 19.16 of Title 19 of the Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to the definition of and permitted zone for single-room occupancy facilities.
Move to waive further reading of the ordinance and to introduce ordinance number 1111, amending chapters 19.04 and 19.16 of the Camarillo Municipal Code pertaining to the definition of and permitted zone for single-room occupancy facilities.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion carries 4 to 1. Okay. Now, does that go on, that's not a, that goes into effect 30 days from now, is it?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, the only thing we haven't covered is new business. Go back to that.
New business.
Okay. Charlotte, you want to lead off with that new business?
Sure. I attended a Streets and Trans Committee meeting. We interviewed companies for operation of the transit service and that will be coming back to you soon. I attended an Arts Council dinner with the mayor and council member, Ventura County Arts Council Committee. And you didn't bring out the award. It's a beautiful award.
On the counter.
Counter in the city clerk's office.
Right.
I
and
think we
it-
should put it on the counter right there in front so everybody can see it when they walk in the
If
place.
they drop it, though, it's glass.
City clerk find a suitable place for it.
But it's a beautiful award, and we won it because we contribute to the arts, specifically to Save Our Kids Music and to the
Keep going. Arts Council, Fiesta,
the ones that nominated us are SciArt and SOCM
And
and
New West Symphony.
and the New West Symphony. And we also contribute to the Concerts in the Park and Fiesta and a lot of other things. And the mayor made sure everybody there understood that.
We also have symphony orchestra that plays at Methodist Church once a month. They are fantastic.
Yeah, we don't contribute to them.
Really good.
Okay, I attended a Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency meeting today. We adopted some policies and the process for developing our groundwater plan. So we're getting there. 1 to 2 policies a meeting. I also this morning started out at 7 o'clock at the Camarillo Healthcare District Semi-Annual Advisory Panel meeting. And it's changed a little bit since Kara Partridge Rankin became the new CEO. And they had, I've got to tell you, it was a wonderful presentation this morning by Deputy Cyrus Zeta on cybersecurity. Is something everybody should hear. For instance, many people don't know that when you take a picture of that little baby out there, Jameson, and you put it on Facebook, everybody can tell right to the pinpoint of where that baby's bedroom is that you took a picture. There are, as long as your cell phone's on, there are websites where people can go and they can track wherever you're going because of the GPS in your phone. I really think that we ought to invite Deputy Zeta to make his presentation right here, televise it, and run it so everybody can hear it.
You're trying to scare everybody now that don't use that phone?
He also told you for sites how to disable some of those things and that you can temporarily disable them, but they're things that very few people know about or think about, and I think we'd be doing a public service because he is a member of our police department. And that's all I have.
Okay. Kevin?
I did attend a VRSD meeting, and I just want to thank staff for all the hard work they've done on these water issues. I think it's been a challenge, but where we were and where we've ended up is remarkable. So I want to thank the staff for that. That's all.
Okay. Jan?
Thought you were going down the line. Meetings I've attended. Mr. Morgan and I had a policy committee meeting where we reviewed the policy or policy or an ordinance regarding our rent review. I guess both. Our rent review commission, and then so that will be coming to council fairly soon. And then investment committee. We did hear from our investment advisors, and we're doing well considering, and things are safe and secure. That's all I have.
You know, tying on to that just a little bit, Your Honor, the investment committee, I get to hear a different one tonight. And I like what they're doing. 2.89
Well,
is better than what we're doing on the other side, but
It's more
I'd
aggressive.
like to look at that, Ronnie. Where are you? And see if there's anything we can fit into that a little bit. Oh.
Plus, it's a little more aggressive.
Yeah,
than our-
I like what they're doing. But anyway, that was a good committee meeting, and our people gave us a really good report. Did you all get a copy of the that report we got? Okay, I just want to make sure you got a copy. It's a green folder.
A green
The
folder?
forecast and all that stuff, it's in a green.
I didn't get a copy.
Okay, we'll have to get you a copy because it tells about the United States also, wherever, and how well we're doing or how not so well we're doing. And it's good to have. So if you haven't got one, I'll have to get you one. He had a bunch with him. Okay, and the policy committee, she told you about that. That'll come back to us later. I went to Adolfo Camarillo's birthday party, and Bill and I got to stand behind there and see a great band. That band, our Camarillo High School band, won first place in the percussion, the drums, and they won second place in the bands overall, second place. Over half of them are freshmen. We're going to have a great band in the coming years. We'll probably win everything, but they were fantastic. The event itself, what do we have, about 1,500? Anybody get notice? My wife guessed about 1,500 because she cut so many pieces of cake in the back, and she counted about 1,500. Yeah, in that range. Anyway, it was fun. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, I went to ribbon cuttings. I don't go through all that. 2 ribbon cuttings, and I went to the APCD, Air Pollution Control District, representing us, but also representing the county at the Tri-Counties level. This is where you get to see the other 2 counties and what they're doing and some things they're pushing and what's going to affect us in the future. We had a Chinese delegation here. Bill made a good little speech out there. He didn't speak Chinese, but he did. He made his
interpreters.
Yeah, interpreters.
Translators.
And they sent back word, by the way. They really appreciate what Camarillo's done and what we did for them. And in the future, they'll make sure they give reciprocity. They'll treat us as well. EDCVC. EDCVC was just showing, had a long report, not long, this was kind of medium, about how well we're doing. We've made a lot of loans, making money, money's coming back. That agency's done well, and they're getting a reputation in this whole area. I've got one question. That would be from Jeffrey. Jeffrey, do you know anything about the Farm Bureau water tour? Anybody know about that? It's going to happen.
Notice of.
It's going to happen on Wednesday. Is anyone going? Because I'd like to try to go. Anyway, I'm going to try to, water's my thing, so I'm going to go on the tour and see what's going on. I'll give you a report when I get back.
I did it a couple years ago, too.
So, anyway, that's it.
Well, in addition to getting the art, the public agency supported the arts in Ventura County. We also went with Kevin Jorgensborg down to Long Beach, and we got an award for our energy work we did at the courtyard and City Hall and everything else. It was an honorable mention. We got beat out by our arch rival, Thousand Oaks.
Oh.
But, of course, we told them we were going to come after them next year.
That's right.
But anyway, we got that as an award, so this was our week's award. Mike mentioned the Chinese visitors. We had 6 of them, I think, attend, and they were all members of the government of Shaoxing, and they're all in their various environmental areas, and very interesting. They also toured the sewage treatment plant and other parts of the city. Before that, we had 2 people come and visit from Australia who were going through on a motorcycle ride from coast to coast.
They get across the ocean.
They took a plane over and they rented, they leased motorcycles in New York City and drove to Chicago, to L.A. Took them 21 days. Had one person on their entourage was killed.
Oh.
They ran into some herd of sheep on a Colorado mountain road. And anyway, they were riding for to fight to raise money to fight depression, particularly among the veterans and everything. So very interesting, very nice people. And attended 3 ribbon cuttings, and I think that's just about it. So all you have is we passed out this thing about the energy award we had, and that's.
Don't forget about Todd Terrace.
I will. So, all right. If there's nothing else, I want to announce that we're going to adjourn in the memory of Todd Terrace. For those of you who may know Todd, he was very involved in the senior issues. He was a member of our Council on Aging for more than 6 years. He was served many years on the Fiesta Committee. Mike knows about that. Can probably talk about it. He'd been a local ombudsman for the county for probably 15 years, and he also taught seniors, defensive drivers training through ARP at many years at Leisure Village. And I mentioned he was on the Council on Aging for more than 6 years. So he was a good citizen of our city and worked hard for senior issues and did a nice job, and he'll be missed.
Your Honor, I'd like to say a couple words because Todd and I knew each other quite well. He was on the Fiesta Committee for several years, and I finally talked him into being president. He put in 2 years as president, and that was enough. It's a lot of work. But Todd, for his age, did a lot. I couldn't, I'm not sure how old he was when he died, I guess today. But he was up there, but he did his job. He went out and rode around the carts in the hot sun and all that stuff. But we appreciate Todd.
Good guy. Anything you want to say?
No, I knew, as everybody did, Todd was a good man, and he worked hard, and he's really going to be missed. He's kind of what Camarillo's all about. These people live here, and they hopefully many of them work here, they retire here, and they give up their time, and that's what Todd did. So.
Okay, if there's nothing else to come before this council, we'll stand adjourned to the meeting.
Nope.
We have it while we recess we're adjourning this meeting to go to a recess. And, okay. Next council meeting is the 4th of November.